Our story begins with a portal and a mission of annihilation organized after the Day of Awakening. 5 years later, people's abilities are defined by the fundamental fate linked to their birth. During the preparations, it is said that the Flying Tiger sect participates in attacks with few casualties. A man observes silently, reflecting that the sect does not choose members solely by class. Nervous, he participates in his first mission and is approached by another novice. A warning alerts him about Seo. Surrounded by rumors due to his dangerous ability, upon accessing his system, Seo sees the power to steal the fate of the dead, limited by various conditions and belonging to the worst class. Despite the fame, he has never killed anyone. Trying to compose himself, he talks with colleagues about a dinner after the mission. He declines due to exhaustion and fear of disdain. A girl teases him, saying he is weaker than she is, despite the age difference. Jang insists that he attend. Kang interrupts, ordering Seo to return to position. In the end, he promises to think about the invitation and decides to stay back, believing it to be safer. Kang still shows concern, but Seo thanks him. Remaining cautious as the mission is about to begin there, they both move away, and Seo thinks he would like to fight alongside him in the future. Time passes, and a voice announces the start of the special annihilation mission against the Demon Kingdom. Several players gather in front of a portal, awaiting final orders. Seo focuses on staying in the rear, only taking care of the remaining demons. He enters the portal believing everything will go well if he does not harm the sect. Soon, a warning appears that high-level monsters have appeared in large numbers. The leaders take their positions, and the battle begins almost immediately. The creatures advance fiercely against the players. A leader warns that monsters are being summoned in the rear. At that moment, a roar echoes, heightening the tension of the combat. Seo shows fear upon seeing monsters approaching. Even so, he attacks them without hesitation. The number of enemies is greater than expected, and the demonic energy makes it hard to breathe. As he tries to retreat, Seo is attacked from behind and ends up surrounded. Desperate and with no way out, he is saved by an unknown girl. Surprised, he realizes she is also protecting the rear. Before he can thank her, the environment begins to crumble. Then a giant monster appears, but is easily defeated by another mysterious girl. She searches for Seo but attacks the crowd, revealing an absurd power. Seo analyzes her fate and discovers she possesses divine level and regression abilities, indicating a future linked to his. The girl from the future cuts again with her blade and threatens to kill everyone, believing Seo is among them. Shin intervenes, attacking the enemy and refusing to hand over any sect member. As the players flee in panic, the fight continues violently. The time traveler offers to spare the others if they hand over the protagonist. Shin insists on protecting them and ends up severely injured when thrown against the wall. About to finish the attack, the girl from the future strikes another player. The man loses control of his arm after the unexpected blow. Jang appears to help, but his attack is easily contained. This reveals the existence of a barrier in the area. The focus returns to Seo, who desperately tries to escape. He finally emerges from the tree where he was hiding. As he falls to the ground, he sees several players in front of the enemy. Seo believes he has arrived too late. Consumed by guilt, he thinks everything happened because of his weak class. The girl from the future identifies him as Seo and prepares the final blow. Vines emerge, and Shin reappears to stop her. She reaffirms her duty as a leader by protecting her members, but she is hit by the girl from the future, and the barrier is undone. Faced with the massacre, Seo cries, certain he will be killed. At that moment, the system appears offering the use of fate theft. The system begins checking for stealable fates, and Seo reflects that everything happened because he is considered an insectoid-grade human. Then the protagonist wonders how many deaths were indirectly caused by his existence. In his mind, he accepts that everyone there died because of his distorted fate. At that moment, the system grants the ability Tree Leaf Method. The girl from the future returns to the scene demanding that he die immediately. The system confirms that Seo has stolen the fate of 421 people. Consumed by guilt and rage, the protagonist attacks, blaming her for the massacre. The blow surprises her, but it is not enough to defeat her. Determined, Seo decides to take revenge before succumbing. He activates several abilities simultaneously, even without mastering them. The battle intensifies with constant exchanges of attacks. Seo jumps and believes he sees an opening in her defense. However, the enemy reacts and launches a powerful ice attack. The blow hits him squarely, causing him to fall again. Frustrated, Seo realizes he does not know how to use so many abilities well because many activate on their own, limited by his body and weapon. Even with hundreds of stolen destinations, his revenge seems incomplete. The girl from the future continues to attack without any hesitation in a cruel manner. A flashback shows the protagonist as a child hearing voices that foretold a difficult and tragic fate. The voices announced early losses, constant bad luck, and a life marked by inevitable suffering. Over time, everything comes true when he loses his parents before emotionally maturing. Accidents begin to happen around him, affecting all the people close to him as well. For this reason, he believes he is doomed to be weak, cursed, and extremely unlucky. Even accepted by some, he realizes that everyone ends up dying because of him. Regretful, he thinks he should have sought the girl from the future sooner. If he had done that, only he would have died, avoiding other tragedies. Wishing to go back in time, he suddenly realizes he inherited her ability. The power allows him to return to the past while keeping his memories intact. Without hesitation, he activates the ability, accepting any possible consequence. Time then rewinds, and the protagonist awakens in another unknown place. He wakes up in a room, confirming that he has indeed returned to the past. Someone knocks on the door saying they came to read his horoscope. Upon hearing this, Seo trembles, surprised, and filled with intense happiness. Shin's companion comments that they are on a first date and assesses their compatibility. Seo observes Shin without a mask and believes he has returned to the past, determined to change fate. The horoscope reader asks for his name and birth date while Seo notices her discomfort. He remembers the strange man mentioned by Shin and decides to warn her. The reading shows solid gold and solid wood, called gold cutting wood. This symbolizes terrible compatibility and deeply surprises Shin. The companion gets irritated and accuses Seo of being a charlatan. Irritated, the man invites Shin to leave, but she refuses, mocking him. At that moment, Seo points to the exit and the companion leaves, slamming the door hard. Soon after, a glow begins to take over the place, and the same system from before appears, informing that their statuses are being calculated based on their destiny. Meanwhile, Seo thinks that, although he was expecting all of this, he doesn't believe he can do much about that headache. Shortly after, Shin asks the protagonist to hide under the table. Seo reflects that, in his past life, the young girl had also protected him. However, the boy cannot allow that to happen again, as he wishes to change the future. In a matter of seconds, the tremor disappears. Shin comments that the noise from before was very strange. Quickly, the protagonist begins to leave the place, thinking it would be better not to get involved with Shin. The boy then arrives at a kitchen, hoping to find something useful that he could use. Then he finds what he was looking for. Again, Shin appears, asking where Seo was going, because they needed to get out of that place. She starts to lead Seo to another location, but the young man asks the girl to wait. At that moment, both hear a scream. A desperate man comes running, shouting that there is a monster in the area, and soon after, the creature bites the man's knee. Shin asks them to wait, as she cannot help the man in that situation. Quickly, the protagonist draws a blade, attacking the monster that was in front of him. He had already expected those monsters to appear. They were gigantic worms. Then, Seo asks everyone to duck while he attacks the creatures. He thought that was the last one, but soon after, he hears someone asking for help, indicating that there was another monster in that direction. The protagonist says that if they don't want to die, they should hold on to something, as those insects are not that strong. Upon looking, the protagonist is surprised by what he sees. Apparently, Shin had grabbed a fire extinguisher. She comments that they really are not as strong as they seem, as she also managed to defeat one of them. The protagonist is surprised, finding it funny to see someone capable of killing dragons so happy about something so simple. Seo warns that the stairs are now clear and that they should go down before more monsters like those appear. The group then begins to follow the protagonist's instructions. The boy thinks that while he has the chance, he needs to collect the spiritual pearls. And although they were of inferior quality, it was much more than he expected. Soon after, Shin asks if Seo is not going down as well. The young man asks why she is not evacuating yet, but Shin says she cannot leave him alone. And the protagonist questions her concern for someone she just met. Shin confirms, and Seo asks if she would do that even without knowing what might happen. The boy thinks that Shin is still the same as before and, for that reason, needs to tell her the truth. Soon after, he calls Shin, saying he needs to tell her something. Shin asks what it is. Seo reveals that her name is Shin, that she is of tertiary draconian grade. Confused, the girl asks what he is talking about. Seo continues, saying that her attribute is wood and that she has a skill called tree leaf method. Surprised, Shin realizes that her system window has opened, and not only that, but she actually has a skill called tree leaf method. Next, Seo asks if she remembers the announcement they heard in the room earlier, as it seems everyone gained superpowers. He thinks that, since they awakened their powers, they shouldn't die, as long as they don't encounter that. Soon after, the boy says they should descend quickly. While they descend the stairs, Shin asks what destination the protagonist has. He replies that it would be better if they didn't share their destination windows with each other, because others might hear what they are saying. Seo's system window is the same as 5 years ago, and doesn't seem to have retained the skills he stole before his time regression. However, there is one difference. He has accumulated a large amount of karma, probably as a result of having stolen the destinies of 421 people. Karma increases when major crimes are committed or when a specific user's skill is used. But when too much karma accumulates, the target crosses a certain threshold. The scene returns to the protagonist, who reflects that everyone who crosses the threshold will suffer. Right after, Shin says there was someone in that place. In the hallway, there was a person seemingly wrapped in bandages. Shin suggests they take him out of there, but the protagonist asks her to wait. At that moment, the caterpillar from before appears again. However, the protagonist was already expecting this and strikes the creature. He comments that he is calm now, as there is only one monster left. The boy thinks that the easiest way to check if those people are alive is by using his skill. Then, the system notifies that his skill has been activated, indicating that the number of deceased people nearby was 1. Concluding that the bandaged individual is indeed dead, Seo reflects that he seemed to have a reasonable skill, and if he had awakened his powers, he might have survived. Since the skill was interesting, the protagonist decides to acquire it. He gains a flame manipulation skill, thinking it is perfect, as he needed something like that. Soon after, Shin starts running again, saying there is something ahead. Meanwhile, a man was defeating a caterpillar. He commented that it was very easy, as it was just a tutorial, asking to be allowed to face the boss soon. Then, the man looks to the side. Surprised, he realizes there are other survivors besides him. He asks if they are characters who will join him. Introducing himself, he says his name is Gojum and claims it is a pleasure to meet them. Seo thinks that this guy also started his tutorial here, and then introduces himself, stating his name. Shortly after, Gojum asks what the name of the heroine next to Seo is. Shin, surprised to be called that, replies that her name is Shin. Gojim says he will remember their names and that now that the alliance event is over, something should start soon. Shin asks what he is talking about. Gojim replies that most game introductions follow a certain formula. SEO, seeing Gojim's statistics, realizes he has the primary divine class and thinks that soon he will become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. However, the protagonist does not believe Gojim is capable of that so soon, as he just awakened his powers. Then, Gojim explains that usually, either a boss is defeated with allies, or a strong ally is gained in the middle of the battle, or perhaps a awakening occurs due to the sacrifice of an ally. At that moment, the 3 hear a noise. There was another man in the area calling for help as he was surrounded by several monsters. At that moment, a giant worm appears there, cornering the poor man. Soon after, he had already been killed. Gojim comments that this seems to be the prologue boss they need to defeat. Shin, however, asks if they really want to kill that monster, questioning if that needs to happen. But the protagonist wasn't thinking about that and had already advanced against the creature, striking it with his flame attack. Gojim asks if Seo thinks he can defeat it, but the boy replies no, because at that moment, they wouldn't be able to kill that creature. For now, he had only set it on fire a little. At that moment, the monster manages to escape the flames. The protagonist tells the other 2 to run. He continues to launch fire at the monster, thinking that the creature has already realized that his attacks weren't very effective. The 3 then continue to run. An explosion occurs shortly after. Shin calls for the protagonist, asking him to go in that direction. However, Gojim tells her not to stop. Meanwhile, the protagonist was facing the creature, about to be attacked by it. However, the creature begins to look the other way. The protagonist, throwing fire in her face, says she should be looking at him. He thinks that, considering how things have unfolded, he will have to buy time. The other 2 had already left, and Gojin says he won't forget Seo's sacrifice, asking him to wait, as he will return. Seo thinks he just needs to hold on until the Destiny Protection Agency arrives. Still, he didn't expect to cause so little damage. The monster initiates another attack. Seo notices that the monster's mouth was open, landing another blow on the creature. The strike seems to have had some effect, but the monster quickly rises again. At that moment, someone throws a piece of wood at the monster. It was Shin, who had returned, asking the protagonist to flee. Then, more of those worms appear, starting to advance against Shin. In the midst of the situation, Seo asks her to use the method of her ability. Shin says she needs plants, but the protagonist replies that he is sure it will also work with wood. Upon hearing this, she is surprised and tries to use her ability. To her surprise, it worked. The 2, seeing what happened, are astonished. Then, Shin says they should get out of that place quickly, but at the same moment, both are shocked by what they see. More lizards appear in the area. Shin falls to the ground, desperate, thinking that their chances of leaving alive had run out. She laments having come there to save the protagonist. Then, the boy replies that the trees give life to the flames. He begins to use his flame abilities on the trees. The fire quickly spreads throughout the area. Seo reflects that his abilities are based on their destinies. The foundation and logic behind horoscopes apply in the midst of battle. He concludes that the trees indeed feed the flames. Then, the system informs that the protagonist has defeated the enormous primary grade worm. The system begins to calculate his achievements, and at that moment, our hero falls to the ground. The boy assures that he is fine. The system alerts that he received extra rewards for defeating a stronger opponent. Time passes, and the 2 finally manage to leave that place. Shin, happy, says they can finally leave the area, but upon opening the door, she is surprised by what she sees, wondering where they were. Next, their wounds begin to heal, and Shin comments that that building used to be right in the middle of the city. Seo, looking ahead, notices an item. He thinks he didn't expect the first floor to also be connected to that new location. It was a totem capable of offering healing to others. At that moment, something begins to shine behind the 2. Shin asks what they should do. Seo suggests they rest, as at least there are no monsters there. Then another boy appears, asking how they managed to survive. Shin, realizing who it was, looks visibly irritated. It is revealed to be Gojin. He comments that it's strange for the heroine Shin to have abandoned him before. However, Shin retorts that he is like a supporting villain who betrays his friend. Upon hearing this, Gojin is surprised. He says that doesn't make sense, as he definitely can't be a villain. Observing the situation, the protagonist thinks that Gojin is much worse than before, and says they should leave there soon. At that moment, more people appear in the area, wondering where they were. Quickly, their wounds begin to heal. Some people look at their phones, realizing that the signal has suddenly disappeared. Confusion ensues in the area, and a person appears on a podium. The person announces that all individuals in that area are now present. Introducing themselves, they say their name is Nave, and that they belong to the central branch office of the Destiny Protection Agency. They inform that, from now on, they intend to carry out some actions, and the first of these will be to manage everyone present. The people continue to listen to the explanation. However, they do not accept the situation passively, arguing that it is basically a kidnapping and demanding to be released immediately. SEO thinks this is the true beginning. In his past life, he was a loser. But this time, it will be different. He will grow and become stronger than before. The people present did not understand anything, asking what the Destiny Protection Agency was. Nave explains that they work to protect citizens from the disaster that will arise someday, but the citizens do not agree, demanding to be freed immediately. The agency representative tries to explain the global situation, but the people show no interest. Meanwhile, Gojin remains listening in silence. Irritated, Gojin tells everyone to be quiet, calling them extras. He questions if they do not realize that this opportunity is special. The protagonist thinks Gojin is the same as always, but this time he is not wrong, for being chosen to be there is already a privilege. Next, Nave says he thinks it would be faster to show them what was happening outside. Showing some images, Nave explains that they are live broadcasts from the city of Seoul. He mentions that, across the nation, another space called the Demon Realm has emerged. Over time, monsters appeared in this realm, and the Fate Protection Agency had predicted that this would happen. As a result, they ended up awakening abilities before everyone else, starting to prepare for that specific day. In a chaotic world, they need many more awakened people, and that's why they summoned those individuals believing they have potential above the unawakened. The agency will help them awaken and become stronger under their management. They can leave whenever they want, but they must decide after checking what their ability is first. That way, they can change their minds if they wish. At that moment, a system screen appears for everyone present. Meanwhile, Seo thinks he wanted to check Nave's fate, but his face is covered by a mask. Nave then explains that they must have seen their abilities and can consider them as what they call supernatural powers or even magic. He mentions that those who awakened use these abilities to hunt creatures. They also invade the demon realm to eliminate threats, but this is a very dangerous job, concluding that, in this process, they might end up dying. The same will happen during their training process. But if someone wants to avoid any danger, they must renounce their abilities, as a person unwilling to fight does not need them. With that, the masked man says he will give them an hour to think. Therefore, they should rest on the second floor. Manuals have also been distributed, and they should read them, as after an hour, those who decide to stay can return there. Those who decide to leave can do so through the exit on the third floor. As he said, once they leave, they cannot return or see their destiny window. Thus, Nave finishes saying everything he had to say. Time passes again, and the masked man says he will consider that those who remained want to participate in the training. Soon after, a door opens and Nave informs that this is the first gate. The protagonist, meanwhile, was sitting next to other people. The masked man explains that, at most, 3 people can enter, and if they succeed in the incursion, upon returning through the gate, they will end up in the same place. Each room has a different method of completion, which can be verified when they are inside. The first room has no limit on attempts, but if they leave before succeeding, they will have to start everything over. Showing a box, Nave says it will be provided to everyone and that they just need to grab one before entering the supply center, mentioning that, if they are injured, they can use the healing items they have, or return to the lobby to be healed by the totems. They made an agreement where the Fate Protection Agency would not be responsible in case of death, but they planned to support them as best as they could to prevent that from happening. Thus, Nave finishes speaking and wishes everyone good luck. At that moment, he disappears. But soon after, someone raises their hand. It was a boy saying he was looking for someone to go with him, as his power is of primary ghost grade. Meanwhile, the protagonist observed everything in silence. People were already starting to gather in groups. Seo thinks that this is like a daily job. Then, someone calls for the boy. Looking back, he realizes it was Shin. She then thanks the boy, asking if he doesn't have a group, as she also doesn't, and if by any chance he wanted to go with her. The girl calls for Seo again. He meanwhile seems surprised by something. Shin continues to observe the protagonist, who is shocked by what he had heard in his mind. A voice in his head says that everyone would have lived if he had died, and all of this was because of Seo. Soon after, Shin asks if Seo is feeling okay. He replies that it was nothing, saying that, even so, he will have to decline her offer, because he does much better alone. Shin says she understands, but still thought they were getting along well together. However, the protagonist says she will get along with someone else. Hearing this, Shin remains silent. But soon after, the girl says that even if they couldn't form a group, she would count on the boy. He replies that it's fine. Thus, the scene changes to another location. The protagonist opens the box, receiving his starting items. He thinks it's hard to get items at the beginning, and the life recovery medicine is expensive, but they still keep restocking the supplies. Soon after, Gojin appears, asking Seo to wait, saying that he can't leave his only comrade behind. Seo, surprised, wonders if that had happened in his past life, but decides to pretend he didn't notice. Soon after, Gojin places a hand on the protagonist's shoulder, asking him to wait. Gojin comments that if things continue like this, and Seo develops in this way, the two could be the main protagonists of that story, but Seo says he feels more comfortable this way. Gojin asks the young man not to worry, as he is different from those secondary characters who only get in the way, because Gojun is actually quite strong. Seo reflects that a typical protagonist would have treated him like an extra in his past life, and wonders if Gojin mistook him for someone strong. Still, having a strong companion isn't bad. Seo mentions that Shin is very good, but if he stayed with her, he would have bad luck, and that's why he doesn't want her by his side. However, that doesn't matter to Gojun, because what happens to him makes no difference to Seo. Thus, the protagonist agrees to collaborate with Gojun. Soon after, Gojun approaches Shin, saying he will go get his supply box. Shin then starts to observe Seo. The young man asks why she is looking at him that way. He questions if it's because she doesn't consider herself a heroine, and Shin remains silent. Shortly after, Gojun announces that he managed to get his supply box and asks them to hurry. The scene shifts to another location. Seo and Gojun had already entered the portal. All the rooms are connected to 4 corridors. In each of these corridors, there are demonic monsters, traps, and even safe zones. Observing the situation, the protagonist comments that the objective of this mission is to find the exit. Gojun, excited, says they should start. Seo wonders if the structure of the place is the same as in his past life. He concludes that he should be able to find the exit, but soon after Gojun comments that he was curious to see what would come out of those rooms. At that very moment, however, a sword flies towards Seo. The young man barely manages to dodge it. Gojin is surprised, wondering if that is a trap, as it would be something classic. Not only that, he really liked this kind of thing. The protagonist begins to move forward, leaving Gojin behind. Time passes, and the two continue walking down the corridor. Gojin notices that there are no traps and comments that Seo must be lucky. The protagonist replies that it's not that. Then, some monsters appear. Seo asks if Gojin divided the experience points, and he replies that he did, as he did it while reading the manual. Those monsters are apparently ghostly skeletons of the tertiary class insectoid. Gojin comments that those monsters are probably stronger than those in the tutorial. He states that there are indeed many, but if they join forces, they can defeat them. Soon after, the protagonist unleashes his flame attack, managing to burn some skeletons. Seo says that the entrance is small, so if the monsters pile up there, they won't be able to get through properly. Drawing his sword, the young man begins to jump over some skeletons. However, Gojin says he can't let Seo take all the responsibility all the time. Charging at one of those monsters, Gojin comments that this is really fun. Time passes, and Gojin remarks that every room they enter has an incredible number of monsters, but now he is getting bored, as he has already killed over 100 monsters. Seo asks if Gojin is tired. Gojin replies that they are not very strong demonic monsters, and he learned to fight with a sword just as a precaution, in case he went to another world or transmigrated into a book. Upon hearing this, Seo is surprised by Gojin's words. He then says that when he saw Seo for the first time, he was curious about something. He asks if Seo is perhaps a regressor, or even a reincarnated person. Seo remains silent, telling Gojin that if he is going to talk nonsense, he might as well just leave. Irritated, the protagonist asks them to stop wasting time and move on. Gojin insists that he is not joking, as he realizes that the protagonist is different. He remains strangely calm, adapts very quickly, and is not afraid of the demonic monsters. Making an excuse, Seo says that when he was young, he frequently saw ghosts, so he is used to this kind of thing. Then, Gojin smiles, saying that he is also curious about Seo's past. He asks Seo to tell him more about it, but at that very moment, Gojin receives a blow. At the same instant, the ground begins to crumble. The protagonist shouts for them to run. Gojin manages to escape the area. Looking back, he realizes what happened. He wonders if Seo was perhaps not the main character. As he moved away, Gojin mentions that he loved stories with regression plots, but that this was still somewhat lamentable. The scene focuses on Seo, who in the meantime, was falling. Quickly, the young man draws his sword. He plunges it into the wall, managing to hold on to avoid falling. The system alerts that he has entered a secret room. Not only that, the monsters there are much stronger, and each path has a trap or a monster for him to face. The path to the normal area has been activated, and if he wants to go back, the secret path will be sealed. The system asks if he would like to give up and return, but it is obvious that Seo would not accept, thinking that he might be able to gain more stats than expected in that place, all thanks to Gojin for having entered all the rooms with the monsters. Therefore, Seo needs a chance to grow on his own. The young man then invokes his fire magic again, starting to advance against the monsters that are in the secret area. The boy seems to have a lot of ease in evolving, and, in the meantime, continues to gain several points. Time passes, and the system alerts that his strength has increased to stage 4, after the protagonist uses his status points. Seo thinks that things are getting easier as he increases his attributes, and he couldn't believe he managed to reach that point just with them. Analyzing his stats, he realizes that he was already at stage 5 of endurance, and not only that, he is getting stronger and stronger. The young man reflects that he wanted to know how strong they would become because, regardless of the stat, everyone starts from phase 1. The difference in each phase is the time and effort it takes to reach the next one. Even if he gains a certain amount of experience, the growth rate is higher if the class is lower. People like Gojin, with his divine class, would become stronger at a faster pace. Since Seo accompanied him, Gojin will probably be much more powerful than before. However, this time, it won't make a difference, because Seo will be the only one to receive the bonus from the first completion. And to do that, he needs to accomplish something, because he has to finish everything by the end of that day. Looking ahead, our hero notices a tunnel, stating that it was time to face the boss. It is clear that it is different from the rest of the area in that place. Not only that, he is feeling something different from before. Without wasting time, the young man invokes his fire magic. At that very moment, a boss monster appears in the area, and beside it, there was another. Seo, hidden, thinks that those are martial generals and knows that seeing them up close would be very different. Moreover, he did not expect to be trembling so much at the sight of those monsters. However, he believes he can defeat them if he can follow the plan. But, at that very moment, one of the monsters notices the protagonist, who quickly manages to counterattack, throwing blue fire at him. Seo thinks that the monsters found him first, and therefore, at least he managed to draw their attention. As for the gold attribute, it seems that the fire attack is working very well, so he should be able to buy some time with that attack. But surprisingly, the monster manages to shake off the attack. The system warns that unless they are defeated at the same time, they will continue to restore themselves. The protagonist, amidst that situation, concludes that fighting head-on makes no sense. Meanwhile, the young man begins to flee, thinking that he was almost reaching the exit. At that very moment, the boy stops. However, in reality, he ended up slipping, starting to use his fire ability, managing to make a blade coming towards him fall to the ground. Still, that was not enough, because the other boss continues to chase him. Continuing to run, our hero thinks he can feel the wind, starting to enter another place. The boss does the same thing. However, the monster does not understand anything, as several system windows were appearing, informing that the younger martial general was restoring himself. At that very moment, the boss is surprised by something. Then, the protagonist appears, kicking him. Afterward, he hits him from behind, pushing him into the other dungeon. The system alerts that the other general has been defeated. The boy falls to the ground, and the system informs that he gained extra status points for defeating an opponent stronger than him. The protagonist is surprised, thinking that all he needs to do is leave the boss room since he completed the phase. However, there is still one thing he would like to confirm. He thinks that if the fate of a monster is to take on the form of a human, he should be able to steal it too, starting to use his ability. Seo is pleased, saying that he already knew, because if a humanoid monster can do that, he can steal its fate. In his past life, the reason he did not use his ability was not because he didn't want to, but because he had almost no mana. He had a restriction that cost more mana if the target had been dead for a longer time. With his levels of magic, which were considered insectoid grade, unless the target was right in front of him, he couldn't use his ability. From that point on, he had the thought that he might be able to steal the fate of a humanoid monster. But as he was unable to resist the energy coming from the higher demon realm, he never had the chance to try. The scene returns to the present, with the protagonist gaining a looting ability that could be activated automatically when the sword was drawn. The protagonist draws his sword, noticing that the strikes felt different. He thinks that the sword seemed much lighter than usual. However, the boy has no time to think, as the system appears, notifying him that he gained a large amount of karma. But the boy thinks it's fine, because, compared to stealing from people, the amount of karma he gains from stealing the fate of monsters should be minimal. Moreover, it should be worth it for the results he had obtained. Humans who gain a lot of karma cross the threshold, and humans find this something terrible. Meanwhile, the boy wonders if, by any chance, he was getting closer and closer to that threshold. Soon after, our hero enters the portal, finally clearing it. People were surprised because the boy cleared the portal very quickly. Not only that, he had done everything alone. Shortly after, someone calls out to the protagonist. Gojin, jumping on him, says he always knew he could do it. However, the protagonist dodges the hug, saying he is not his ally, and, for that reason, Gojin should not trust him. Then, the masked man appears again, congratulating him for clearing the first stage and asking if, by any chance, he has some time. Time passes and the scene changes to another room. SEO, meanwhile, seems to have received a gift for clearing that portal. He thinks that, since it is a hard-to-obtain inventory item, he cannot miss the chance to get it so soon. The boy was holding a piece of paper, thinking that he doesn't want to draw too much attention from the Fate Protection Agency. Soon after, he starts to see some news on his phone. People were talking about something strange they saw before the earthquake, and, from the video, it seemed that the protection agency was going to teach them. The protagonist then starts watching the video, which is apparently an advertisement from the protection agency. The woman in the video says that, in order to protect all the non-awakened, the protection agency was doing its best. Our boy tries to use his fate detection ability, but the system denies it, assuming they were using items to protect the woman. The woman continues speaking, saying that more events like these will continue to happen, and there is no need to worry, because they will protect everyone's future, asking them to believe in the Fate Protection Agency. SEO, meanwhile, ponders the woman's words, mentioning that the Fate Protection Agency is merely a collection of the best awakened. All agency members are known for hiding their faces with masks. A flashback appears, showing someone with a mask. Then, that person reveals themselves. The protagonist thinks that woman is a member of the agency, and it would make perfect sense if no one knew how strong she really is. However, the protagonist was too confused to think about all this. The scene shifts to another location, with a man asking how they were dealing with these matters, and if they hadn't said it would take at least a week for the entire stage to be cleared. It is revealed that, at that table, were all those awakened who wear masks. The blonde asks the man to take responsibility for all this, asking him to make a report on the trap that Seo had used and that everyone else should prepare to clear the monsters from the rest of the area. Then, everyone had already left that place. The man thinks he didn't expect the protagonist to lure a monster into a trap, wondering what could happen if he cleared the second door the next day, and what would happen if the superiors knew that the person who cleared the stage is of a mere insectoid class. The scene goes to the first floor of the training area, and Gojin asks Seo if he isn't going to the second room that day, and if by any chance he forgot about the bet they made, because he shouldn't even try, since Gojin could help clear the room before Seo even had a chance. Our hero says he will go at his own pace, and, since he is not Gojin's ally, he can leave. But Gojin replies no, because he actually wants to get closer to Seo. Meanwhile, some girls were thanking Shin for helping them survive, but Shin says it was nothing, because thanks to her he managed to block the other attacks. The protagonist starts to observe the girl, thinking that she seemed to be calm. Then, Gojin says he hates characters that are too nice. Soon after, Shin begins to leave. Seo continues to observe all of that, but at the same moment, he seems to notice something. Then, a man appears, and Seo thinks it looked like he would have to suffer through that again. That guy then sits at the table where Shin was, saying that he is really good at reading palms, and the other girl responds that it's true because last time he was quite accurate. But in fact, Shin continues to listen to the conversation disinterestedly. Shortly after, the man says he wanted to read Shin's palm, but she doesn't seem interested in that. The guy tries to take the girl's hand, saying that this isn't a chance that comes around often. But still, Shin refuses to do that. Watching the guy seems to confuse him. At the same moment, the young man changes his expression, but at the same moment, it goes back to normal. Seeing the protagonist approach, he asks if he wants him to read his palm, but he replies no, saying he had something to discuss with Shin, asking if they could have a moment. The girl is confused about everything that had happened but still agrees to do it. The scene shifts to another location with Seo saying he wants to talk to her. At the same moment, some players appear in the area, thanking him for letting him use his internet. Seo thinks that after trying to clean the room from the mountain of hellish knives alone, he ended up sharing internet, which was one of the system's rewards. Everyone seemed friendly towards him, but that kind of friendship is different, which is completely unknown to the boy, since in his previous life, people had started to avoid and reject him at some point. But still, one person appeared, and even in that situation, the guy treated him with indifference. As a result, he became friends with that person over time. But he could never imagine anything, because all of this was just a facade. Because after some time, people began to belittle him for his ability. The boy then tries to talk to the young man, saying he promised not to tell anyone, but he replies that he has no idea what he's talking about, asking if he has any proof. But the protagonist thinks he obviously revealed his ability. The guy asks if it's not true, and Seo starts analyzing the guy's ability, which is palm reading that could reveal his ability just by touching the guy, thinking that he is the only bastard who could know about his ability. The scene returns to the present with Seo saying that guy has an ability he should keep his distance from, and should never show him his palm. This even counts when it's to touch someone, and Shin, frustrated, says that's why that guy kept going. Seo says that anyway he wanted to inform her of this and soon starts to leave, but the girl asks him to wait, saying she cleared the same dungeon that Seo had cleared before, asking if he wanted to go to the second room next to her. But the boy says it will be very difficult with her. She gets frustrated, asking why this had to happen. The protagonist replies that he lacks experience, leaving her surprised by what she had heard, saying she's not as weak as she seems. Seo says that her ability would be weakened in the next room since she has the fire attribute, and in the first room, it would have been incompatible with her since it had the gold attribute. Seo is sure she knows what she's talking about, and the girl says that the second room will definitely be disadvantageous for her. The protagonist asks if the girl understands, and she replies yes, to a certain extent. But still, she doesn't give up on the boy. In the next scene, our hero is already in another location, wondering about what had happened before, because even after saying that to the girl, she simply thanked him for his advice. Thus, the scene goes to Shin, who remembers the protagonist saying he felt more comfortable alone, thinking that she had rejected his proposal but still stayed. By Gojin's side, that's why she imagined he wanted to keep some distance between the two of them. Even after that, she called him alone to tell about that guy's ability from before, supposing she could have refused using a different excuse. But still, she wants to know why the boy is so honest. Thus, the scene shifts to another location, and Cheon asks if he was going to the second room next to Shin. However, our hero responds by saying he will go alone, and as he starts to leave, he thinks he needs to eliminate that bastard so he can't bring him down. Surprisingly, Cheon asks if he wants to form a group with him. It would be convenient for him since his class is quite high, and not only that, but he is of the dragon class. However, Cheon already knows it's a lie, asking what the guy's ability is. He replies that he can make firearms with water. Hearing this, the protagonist agrees, saying they can go together, and the happy guy says he will get ready and come down soon, starting to climb the stairs. Meanwhile, our hero thinks it's a relief that guy approached him first. Time passes again, and the two were already close to the destined portal. The conditions are clear that they must find the ice crystal and return to the lobby. Moments later, they had already entered the portal, apparently a place filled with fire. Cheon says he was surprised that he accepted his proposal so easily, thinking it was because of his water attribute, asking if he happened to hear the conditions correctly, wondering if there happens to be ice in that place. Mentioning that it is very hot there, he wants to know where the hell there could be a jar of ice. However, since he was next to the protagonist, they should find it quickly. At that moment, our hero draws his sword, advancing towards Cheon, launching an attack on him. But it is revealed that it was not the guy but rather a monster, saying that those creatures are approaching. Then several flaming frogs appear, starting to advance towards the two. Cheon says frogs are easy, starting to use his water ability to defeat those monsters. That happily realizes it worked, mentioning that his powers will work very well there, and it will be easy as long as they find an ice crystal, and the protagonist agrees with that, thinking he already knows where it is and therefore is not in a hurry, wondering what he should do with the boy. Cheon then starts to observe Seo, wondering why he is smiling, supposing he is thinking it was a good choice to go there alongside Cheon. Time passes again, and the two continue to defeat those frogs. Cheon seems to feel sweet, asking if that is what Cheon or Mana Anemia mentions about there being too many monsters in that place compared to the previous room. Not only that, but he has no choice but to fight with a sword, doing the same as the protagonist. However, his sword has no effect, and the boy ends up being thrown away. That monster climbs on top of the boy, who begs to get away from him, asking the protagonist for help. But our hero just sighs, and the guy asks why he is just watching him suffer. Then the protagonist strikes that monster, telling it to go back if it can't keep up, claiming he can win without his help. Cheon says he will be fine if he rests a bit. In his mind, he calls Seo a bastard, asking if he thinks it's all this just because he was the first to complete the mission. Mentioning he formed a group with him to see what ability he had but can't verify because their hands are bandaged. Even if he tried to guess based on his abilities, he seems to be hiding something. For this reason, he must check because there must be a moment when he lowers his guard, and for that reason, he must take advantage. Soon after, Cheon sits on a rock, but at that moment, the ground starts to shake. The boy soon falls. It is revealed that there was a creature in that place, but Seo defeats it in seconds. Cheon thinks there were more monsters besides those frogs, mentioning that he had lowered his guard. Again, our hero calls for the boy, saying he had already saved him twice, mentioning that that monster is annoying to kill so they should move on before more appear. Cheon, apparently irritated, agrees to do so, thinking that Seo isn't that good anyway, and as soon as he recovers his mana, he could easily face him. Seo then feels that gaze, asking if he has something to say, but that idiot remains silent. Thus, time passes again, and Cheon asks if there is anything in that place, supposing it is really the ice crystal. Starting to observe a shining sphere, Cheon, happy that it is exactly that, thinks they just need to take it back to the lobby to clear that room. Not only that, but there is only one of the spheres, assuming they are the first to clear that room. But at that moment, Cheon thinks that the people from the training center will think he won that raid just because of the protagonist, whereupon he starts to run, thinking that if there is only one ice crystal, he must be the first to grab it and the first to clean that room, starting to imagine the rewards he could earn, gaining honor and respect along with thousands of admiring gazes. All of this will belong to the boy himself. About to grab the sphere, he claims he was the first to clean that room, but when he grabs that orb, he feels something different, realizing that they are actually bags of frog eggs. At that moment, some flaming frogs appear, trapping the boy in that place, throwing him towards the lava, and the protagonist, observing that situation, says that this is karma for trying to stab him in the back. Cheon tries to plead for help from Seo, but he just ignores him and starts to walk away. In the next scene, our hero was in an ice cave, finally managing to grab that ice crystal, thinking that the condition to open the shop is to obtain a spiritual pearl, and originally would not know of the shop's existence or spiritual pearls. However, this time he managed to open the shop because he had collected some spiritual pearls before going to this place. The boy then buys an item in the shop, that if he places an item in prayer, he will receive an item of his desires, and Seo thinks he had to trade his achievement status because he didn't have enough money. Not only that, but the name is quite funny because in the end, they just wanted him to place a precious and expensive item inside it. While praying, the boy thinks that the ice crystal is a tertiary ghostly level item. What he wants is a primary ghostly level item. There is a small difference, but it is still possible to obtain the item since both are of ghostly level. At that moment, a glow occurs, and Seo obtained an item that apparently was not what he wanted. The boy in turn continues to make several wishes. After a while he says that if he can't have quality, he will have quantity, and since he has that much ice, there's no way he won't succeed. Time passes once again, and the scene shifts to another location. Cheon, meanwhile, had come out alive from that lava, asking if he thought he would be okay after leaving him alone in that place. Soon after, the guy looks to the side, assuming it was an egg, but he realizes that it is not that. Thus, time passes again, and Cheon had finally exited the portal and happily thinks he was the first to clean the floor. People are surprised, because the boy managed to exit the portal in a single day, and the happy boy thinks that this was the reaction he was waiting for from the people, concluding that it is much better than the protagonist's group. But at that moment, he realizes that Seo was already in that place, asking how he could just leave alone because he had been looking for him for quite some time. At that moment, the masked guy appears, interrupting the guy's conversation, who then calls for Cheon. Cheon then says that he will forgive him this time, and for that, they should shake hands as a symbol of reconciliation. Seo is surprised by this, and soon after, Cheon begins to use his palm reading ability. Shaking the boy's hand, he asks him not to be too scared. Starting to walk away, he thinks he feels better since he was the first to clean the room, beginning to analyze the protagonist's statistics. That surprisingly realizes he is at the tertiary insectoid level but thought he would be at least at the human level, mentioning that he went through all of this just because of such a low level. Our hero, meanwhile, continued to observe the boy, and soon after, he smiles, thinking that he was happy to acquire that ability in time. The specific ability is a protective amulet that protects the part of the destiny window of the players. He couldn't prepare many because he didn't have ice crystals after obtaining that amulet, but it seems the boy found crystals when he placed one on the fire frog. Cheon says it is of the water type and has an ability, and the masked guy asks if he can tell how he found the ice crystal. Gojin, looking to the side, says that even Seo returned very injured, but is still surprised he cleaned in a single day. After that, Cheon finishes his explanation, and then Gojin calls for the boy, saying that he is amazing. And the guy recognizing Gojin thinks he believed he was at the tertiary divine level. Gojin says he has been trying that room for a few days now, but still continues to fail, mentioning that the protagonist seems to be weaker than he had supposed. Cheon says that he is of tertiary grade and it is clear that he would be very weak, mentioning that he ran away alone because of a crowd of monsters. Gojin, hearing this, is surprised, saying that he is more like the main character, leaving Cheon very convinced, saying that he thought he wasn't wrong, and then the boy asks if they can talk a little. Meanwhile, the protagonist was listening to this conversation, and the system warns that the destinies of Gojin and Cheon were intertwining, thinking that Gojin will stop paying attention to him now. Not only that, but he will take care of Cheon for him, stating that things are getting better than he expected. Thus, the scene shifts to another location with the meeting of those masked guys. The blonde asks if Cheon is of phantasmal level, but the girl responds that he is actually of human level. The guy asks if anyone went with him, and the girl replies that Seo went. And amidst that situation, the blonde thinks that something is strange. The girl says yes, warning that Cheon had said something strange before because he mentioned killing fire frogs and then found out that one of them had swallowed an ice crystal. However, the blonde says that monsters shouldn't be able to approach the crystal cave, asking if they didn't set up the barrier beforehand. The girl says she really checked and the barrier was down and the monsters ate all the ice crystals. The guy then becomes very irritated, asking Sung how he did such a poor job, and he replies that he checked several times but there was definitely no problem. The fact that the cleanup was done faster than expected only means that there were more capable trainers. But still, the guy hadn't convinced the blonde, asking if he can take responsibility for that statement, and if he can say that his plan had no flaws, and since there are so many capable trainers, they should proceed to the third room. questioning if he can take responsibility if everyone ends up being killed, stating that the third door onward is the true demon realm, and everyone will be killed if they enter there without proper preparations, concluding that they needed to make them much stronger than they are now, ordering to keep a closer watch on Seo. Thus, the scene shifts to our hero, who thinks that he hadn't foreseen this. The location changes again to a few days later. Some people were discussing, asking if he was sure that the raid method Cheon had told him was correct, and if he might have lied. His colleague asks what advantage he would have with that, but the other man mentions that the people who finished that room have no relation to Cheon. His colleague says it makes sense, mentioning that Seo, along with Gojun, finished long after him, even being from the same team in the past. But the other guy says that those two don't work together. Meanwhile, Seo was listening to the conversation, thinking that that guy went around spreading false information and probably has already been abandoned by Gojun. At that moment, a red system window appears, stating that everyone must gather in the hall at 6 p.m. that day. Thus, the scene shifts to the present, and that masked girl appears again, saying that she gathered everyone there to talk about the third portal, mentioning that from that point onward, they will be allowing entry into the third portal. People are surprised by this announcement. The masked person says that from the third portal onward, they will be entering the demon realm, and instead of just training fields that the protection agency had prepared, concluding that from that moment on, everyone will be moving together. Not only that, but the true environment of the demon world is much harsher. They will also end up encountering a wide variety of new monsters. Meanwhile, several gods will be watching them as they clean the demon realm. Therefore, when they hear the voices of a god, they should not respond immediately and should first check the updated guide, and then people start analyzing their system windows. The girl says that they added several new ways to deal with situations in the demon world and recommends that they read it before entering the portal. After saying all that, she asks them definitely not to get killed. Thus, people start to get nervous, stating that there is a possibility of being killed. But meanwhile, Seo remains silent. At that moment, another girl appears next to the boy, asking if he can differentiate them because others always confuse them. But Seo thinks he can't confuse them because they, along with Shin, were the only ones who talked to him when Cheon went around spreading rumors about him in his past life. So even if they were twins, their destinies are different. Our hero uses his skill seeing that the blonde girl one, when using long-range weapons, will always hit the target, but the mana consumption will vary with distance and class. He also analyzes the statistics of the other girl, realizing that she has the same ability as her twin sister, thinking that things really don't change, mentioning that in his past life, only one had survived. Unfortunately, the other ended up dying in the third room. And returning to the present, the protagonist asks if she wants to go to the third room with him. The two then start to argue, and Seo thinks he must ensure they stay alive this time. Thus, time passes again. They had finally entered the third floor, and the conditions were to hunt more than one monster of each type from the Ice Valley. The scene shifts to Seo with the system notifying that the demonic rhino is filled with aquatic energy that surpasses his fate, and the stats will be reduced by 10%. Meanwhile, the two twins were following our hero. The girl in the back says that hunting monsters should be the goal of this mission, and the other replies that she can't see anything. And at that moment, they spot some rabbits ahead, which instantly change their expressions, starting to advance towards the group, but within seconds, they are defeated. Moments later, the group had already bought some sweaters to keep warm at the store. The girl asks how he finds things so easily, and Seo thinks that after years he got used to it, saying it was similar to the game he used to play before. Then the blonde, whom I think is the youngest, was asking Seo to check her weapons too, because she needed to buy a new bow. After that, the two sisters, who are indistinguishable, were already properly equipped. Without wasting time, the protagonist starts defeating more rabbits, and meanwhile, the twins wouldn't stop fighting like idiots. She was a national team archer, thinking that their hunting efficiency skyrocketed because they were using appropriate weapons, mentioning that in his past life, one of them became a high-ranking sniper. Moreover, her other sister could have been the same if she hadn't been killed, concluding that perhaps they wouldn't do very well together. In his past life, the other twin became a completely different person after her sister's death, for she never smiled again after that, and it was as if she had specialized in monster hunting just because of it. Sometime later, she quickly became the strongest and was contacted by the Asura sect, which was one of the 5 largest sects. But still, she had never been happy. Both girls have a great destiny and can become much stronger. That's why he has to ensure that both are safe and join the Flying Tiger sect guild. With that, the members of the Flying Tiger sect who had been killed by her in the past would be alive. The scene returns to the present with the protagonist thinking he will keep an eye on those twins. But at that moment, the boy is surprised. And looking around, he wonders where the other girl has gone. The two then start running in search of that girl, starting to call her name. Her sister was acting crazy, saying she couldn't have gone so far to use a bathroom. Then Seo says he heard a noise in the other direction, but the girl replies she didn't hear anything. And at that moment, the other twin starts talking, saying she was trapped in that other place. Not only that, but the ground had suddenly broken before. Seo descends into that crevice, asking if the twin got hurt, to which she replies she was fine, but that guy was another case. Seo in turn recognizes the person, realizing that it is actually Xion, who, frustrated, thinks that the partner of that twin had to be precisely Seo. However, our hero doesn't care about that, asking if the guy wants help. He says he doesn't want help from someone like him. Thus, the protagonist calmly ignores the guy, saying he should leave that place. But the blonde asks if they should really do that because Xion said he was paralyzed from the attack. Seo then concludes that it's probably the effect of the rabbits, mentioning that he will pass by alone soon. The blonde, who must be the youngest, says those rabbits are quite weak, and the guy, in the meantime, was experiencing a huge embarrassment. saying that Seo needs to go through everything he had gone through. But soon after, one of the twins says that bad guys like him must pay for what they had done. Seo asks to enter the portal because the difficulty will increase when night falls, but the twins say they have increased their stats to withstand the cold. Still, our hero asks not to rush because it is only the first day, and the other twin asks how the next day will be, and if he will accompany them. And the boy replies that yes, because they will work together until they clean the hall. But at that moment, our hero hears some screams, apparently recognizing that voice. He then starts to run towards the noise, saying he forgot something. Thus, the scene shifts to a group apparently surrounded by wolves. It is revealed that Shiel was also among that group. Soon after, one of the wolves attacks one of his companions, and the girl, using her tree ability, asks everyone to stay behind her, starting to defend all the people alone, landing a blow on one of the monsters, thinking that she needs to kill as many as she can now because it will be easier later. But soon after, one of the monsters attacks her from behind. She thinks that if she had one more person capable of fighting, she could survive. But at that moment, the protagonist appears, attacking one of the monsters with his blade. She is surprised to realize that Seo was in that place, who continues to defeat all the wolves with his blade. The girl also helps him, and they quickly end up defeating all, thanking the protagonist for his help. Meanwhile, he maintains his cold expression. Thus, the scene shifts to the lobby, and everyone had already returned to it. They apparently seem to be anxious about something, and Seo says they should know that the situation was unfavorable for all of them. They must flee if they cannot win, and are more than capable of escaping without getting hurt. Shin tries to murmur an apology, saying he always calls her weak, but Seo says she just got lucky this time, asking what would happen if the monsters had some secret ability, and if she was not aware that no one could appear to help. Thinking that a silly death like that could happen, but that definitely will not occur. Asking if she intends to die to save others, mentioning that helping the weak is something only the strong can do, and starting to leave, he asks her not to forget that, because if she lets her guard down, all she will achieve is to leave there as a dead person. Soon after, two girls appear, saying that Seo had been a bit too harsh. However, the girl just smiles in response, saying that the boy was just worried about her because he actually saved her, thinking that she doesn't understand why he keeps trying to maintain the pose of a tough guy, because he is actually a very kind person. Soon after, Shin calls the protagonist, thanking him for being able to save her. But hearing this, Seo just sighs, saying it doesn't make a difference. Thus, the scene shifts to another day, and Seo, along with those twins whose identities are unclear, were already at the portal location, where they finally completed the determined mission. The twin asks if Seo is leaving now, but the protagonist replies that he will wait for them to finish their mission, thinking that no one will stay in that place when it ends, concluding that he can stay there peacefully, because what he really wants is the secret reward earned when hunting the 11th monster. Meanwhile, those two twins continue to argue, practically trying to kill each other, and Seo thinks he is a bit worried that the mission was completed faster than in his past life. Several system windows inform that the death energy is near, and Seo thinks there is someone else besides the two twins who could end up being killed, and a flashback appears in his mind, thinking it will be a problem if he gets involved with Cheon again. Thus, our hero makes an excuse, saying he will leave and then come back, and while walking through the snow, he thinks he will assume they will be fine as long as they stay together. At that moment, Cheon appears, saying he was looking for the boy, claiming he thought he would repay him first, because he had made him go through a huge embarrassment last time. Seo, drawing his sword, asks if he really thought he could defeat him, and the guy says it was obvious because he is actually the protagonist capable of hearing the voice of God, asking Seo to prepare, and throwing some ice, he says that is the power of God. A flashback appears in Seo's mind with someone saying that the two gods will be watching as they enter the demon realm. And observing the situation, he assumes that a god probably possesses Cheon. Using the ability to analyze Cheon's system only confirms that he has indeed been possessed by a god named the Little Guest of the Plague. Seo thinks that those who ally with a god are invited to offer themselves and be possessed, where they are called shamans, where they gain powers due to their possession and also have their mana increased, justifying the reason for gaining a new ability. Still, that ability is quite annoying because they will end up being infected if they touch it, concluding that it is better to make the boy spend his mana first, starting to defend and evade attacks with his sword. The forest meanwhile begins to catch fire. Cheon says that divine punishment will come for him until the end. But at that very moment, an immense number of monsters appear in the area. Seo flees among those creatures, and Cheon says he won't be able to escape, starting to attack those pigs to be able to get out of there. But soon after, one of them charges at the boy, landing a solid hit on him, who then falls to the ground, and a voice says it came to watch because it heard there was a human possessed by a god, but in reality, he is quite weak. Therefore, he is suitable for a low-ranking god, asking what the boy thought of that. Yet it is still fascinating to watch him, even being a very weak human, and Cheon asks if he finds that funny. The voice replies that it is exactly that, and at that moment, someone places a sword on Cheon's back. It is revealed to be the protagonist, and then Cheon begins to ask for help from that voice. Next, the protagonist asks if this is his revenge, mentioning that he has been irritated for quite some time. That's why he must have done this, knowing the risks he was getting involved in. At that moment, one of the twins appears in the area. Seo surprisingly does not kill Cheon, saying that he is now lucky. However, next time he will make sure to kill him, asking him to compose himself. Soon after, the boy approaches the twin while Cheon gets up in tears. The twin meanwhile was very worried, saying that a horde of snow pigs had suddenly appeared, where unfortunately they dragged her sister, leaving the protagonist surprised by what he had heard. And a flashback appears in his head with a woman saying that his fate is bad and full of evil energy. The desperate blonde realizes that the protagonist is not saying anything, asking if there is a problem. SEO begins to be overwhelmed by bad thoughts, affirming that all of this is his fault, and starting to leave, he says he will definitely find her, beginning to run while the twin is behind the boy, who asks her to come back. However, she replies that she will not do that because she also wants to help her sister. Even so, Seo does not accept, stating that something could happen to her too, and with tears on her face, the twin says that Seo had told everyone not to walk alone, asking how she can walk alone when her sister is actually in danger. Hearing this, Seo has no other choice and says he will send her back if it gets dark or dangerous. Time passes, and Seo thinks he doesn't know how that girl died in her past life but is probably in danger just by being in that place, begging not to be dead. The blonde girl, observing around, realizes that there aren't many monsters. SEO thinks it's because the predators wouldn't dare enter a predator's territory. Soon after, they start to hear a noise, and the protagonist takes the girl's hand, hiding in the middle of a pile. At that moment, a monster appears, and the system says it is a tertiary-grade ghost-class Yeti. And observing this, Seo is surprised, noticing that the other blonde girl was being carried by that creature. Quickly, her other sister draws her weapon to shoot at that monster. At that moment, the Yeti notices this and looks to the side. However, Seo managed to hide the girl just in time, asking her to wait a little, and the system then activates the Destiny Thief skill. And observing around, he realizes that there were no dead people in that area. Seo feels relieved, saying they must put his sister in danger if they ended up entering battle now. And observing the creature's movements, he assumes it is heading toward its nest, concluding that they should wait for it to release his sister first. The blonde girl asks if they should attack when it gets dark, and Seo replies that it's better not to fight that monster. In the next scene, that creature was near its nest. Seo, handing over some equipment, says that when it releases his sister, he should lure the creature away after rescuing her to the entrance. Definitely, they should not fight, asking if she can do that because he will get his sister while all this is happening. And descending from a mound, he thinks that with her abilities, she should be able to escape easily from the monster. Soon after, the blonde girl raises her weapon, shooting with that flare. The Yeti had already noticed that light, starting to run towards it. At the same moment, the blonde girl begins to run, and Seo, taking advantage of the situation, approaches his sister. Realizing that she was unconscious, he asks her to wake up, but still, he cannot give her any medication at that moment. Carrying her on his back, he asserts that they must return to the lobby. At that moment, our hero is surprised by something, because there was simply another Yeti, who soon after notices an intruder, advancing towards the protagonist, who wonders how he could be so unlucky. Quickly, our hero sets his foot on fire, managing to dodge one of the attacks, passing underneath that Yeti, but he seems to be surprised by something. The Yeti then starts walking towards the protagonist, who apparently had been surrounded by the two monsters. SEO seems to have no way out, but at that moment, he manages to dodge both attacks while holding the other girl, thinking that he was going to go out hunting anyway. Soon after, the boy places the blonde girl in a nest, asking her to hold on just a little longer, because he will kill them all before they leave. Soon after, those two monsters let out a roar. Our hero was already prepared for battle, and observing the situation, he seems to have understood something. With a smile on his face, he says that it can definitely work, starting to advance towards those two Yetis. While battling and dodging attacks, his agility levels up. The boy then receives another attack from one of the monsters but manages to dodge with a jump, advancing once again towards the creature, imbuing his sword with fire. But still, he has no time to think because that other Yeti also charged at him. And with another jump, he causes the two monsters to collide, which soon after stumble into each other, falling into the ice crevice that was on the ground. And the system then notifies that he has defeated a Yeti of rank tertiary demon. In the midst of that situation, Seo thinks that in the demon realm, there are terrains made only of snow and ice. That's why it tends to collapse easily, concluding that the other Yeti won't be able to climb back to that place. But soon after, that monster starts to thrash around, causing Seo to fall into that ice, beginning to descend in free fall. But soon after, he is cushioned by some trees, and it is revealed that someone was in that location. Xiu then appears, saying that if he lowers his guard, he will end up leaving there as a dead man. Still, he is glad he didn't arrive too late, and soon after, the protagonist thanks him for the help. However, Shin says he should thank the twin who went after her. Using his ability, he says he will pull him up, but Seo tells him to let him descend first. Time passes again, and the blonde girl is already helping her sister, who continues to remain unconscious. SEO, surprised, wonders if they have arrived too late, and if they really cannot fight against the destinies they were born with. But surprisingly, the other sister starts to make some groans. Quickly regaining consciousness, she says that this place has no heater and looks up to recognize her sister, who, surprised, asks where they were. SEO, observing the situation, is left speechless, and a system screen appears informing that the death aura from the white tiger dissipates among the twins, concluding that a defined destiny had been definitively altered, stating that the change of destiny had been activated. Not only that, but he gained some new abilities. SEO is surprised, thinking he thought it was impossible to change the rank of destiny. Meanwhile, the other twin, who cannot be distinguished, hugs the protagonist, thanking him for everything he had done. And our hero is left speechless, thinking that he will leave those complicated matters for later, because there is something much more important. Time passes again, and Cheon, in the meantime, was walking through that ice, and that voice wouldn't stop talking in his head. Cheon asks how he is a god, asserting that he shouldn't have accepted a god who had given him a disease. But the voice says he has crossed the line, and Cheon starts repeating that voice's name multiple times. And soon after, he ends up losing consciousness. Surprisingly, Gojum appears at the location, and asking for help from the boy, he says that the protagonist had attacked him, and that's why he started to flee. Not only that, but he is sure that that bastard is a villain, concluding that they must defeat that boy together. However, Gojum doesn't care about that, saying that if he is the protagonist, he will manage to get out of there without problems, saying that he didn't think he would reveal his true powers by being with him, but actually thought he wasn't the protagonist. Cheon becomes desperate, saying that he is indeed the protagonist, begging for help. But Gojum says again that if he were the protagonist, he would be able to get out of that situation. Cheon, for his part, changes his mind, saying that he is not the protagonist, begging for help, but Gojum doesn't care about that, saying that if he is not the protagonist, he wouldn't bother to help a mere extra, starting to walk away, leaving the poor boy alone in that cold. The scene shifts again to Seo defeating some goblins, and a horde was surrounding him, but easily, the boy defeats them all. After that, the two twins appear at the location, who were arguing again. However, Seo seems to notice something in a matter of seconds, asking the two to duck. Soon after, an unknown girl appears at the location calling for the protagonist, saying that if he surrendered, he would let the others leave alive. The two quickly draw their weapons, but the protagonist stops them. However, he can't do much because there were still some monsters surrounding him. Soon after, he ends up being grabbed by one of them, simply getting trapped in the midst of all that darkness. Soon after, the two twins were already on the ground questioning why they had to meddle in their lives, and if by chance it wasn't him who had saved them, mentioning that they shouldn't have taken the flying tiger's appearance. Soon after, a voice asks not to forget. It is revealed that it was Shin saying that he had definitely killed them. Time passes again, revealing that it was just a mere nightmare. Seo composes himself, thinking that it was just a mere dream, affirming that the future will definitely not be like this because he won't let it repeat, wondering if it was because they were getting so close that it had been a warning. Then the system appears, saying that the two twins thought he was a savior, and their destinies were intertwining. And hearing this, Seo thinks he should distance himself from those girls. The scene shifts to another location where the blonde girl asks if he hates them, but Seo says he is busy and has some things to do, thinking that the two approached Shin, and therefore he shouldn't worry. After that, he slams the door in their faces. Blonde girl number 1 asks if Seo hasn't been distancing himself from them over the past few days, and blonde girl number 2 replies that there must be some reason. Soon after, the two make a hand signal to Shin, who says they can't do anything, and therefore they should go to the 4th room, just the 3 of them. Then the scene shifts to another location where the 3 had already entered the portal, where the completion conditions were to hunt monsters and collect spiritual pearls in the forest maze. The two twins are happy because now it would be a forest and the air was quite fresh. Shin takes the lead, asking them to be careful because something is approaching. And in the midst of that situation, he recognizes that it is not a monster and thought it was the forest itself that was being dangerous. The Sword Forest Room is a demonic realm that has no end and there is no change in the terrain, concluding that if they reach the end, they would be sent to the other end. One of the twins says that collecting 1,000 spiritual pearls should take a long time, and Shin replies that they should take a look over there in the other place first. Blonde girl 1 says that instead of separating, it would be better to stay together this time because the protagonist had said to stay together. Not only that, but it would be good if the guy had gone with them too. Hearing the conversation, Shin thinks it seems that Seo had been a good person to them. She remembers the guy and thinks that he is still quite harsh with his words. However, inside he is a good person. At that moment, they hear a noise. Soon after, Shin asks them to stop. One of the twins looks at the ground, confused. Thus, the scene shifts to another location, with the protagonist observing something. Seeing a kind of egg, he says that it is more ferocious than he has seen. That is an unknown egg that he received as a reward for killing a yeti as the 11th type of monster, and the offspring hatching from the egg depends on its diet. Binding the mouth of the egg, Seo thinks he already knows what he wants to come out of the egg, and the scene shifts to the moment when Seo was rummaging through the bodies of those yetis, and the system notifies that he defeated the tertiary rank ghost yeti, and was starting to use his sealing destiny ability, beginning to steal the water type attribute. Thus our hero asks to change his attribute to the specific type, which is water. The system, in turn, does this, notifying that the water defeats fire has been unlocked. Not only that, but the reduced attributes were restored to their normal state. Returning to the present, Seo thinks that he couldn't even buy a decent weapon in the ice room because he had to buy food tolerant to the water attribute, claiming that in the next demon realm, he will buy better weapons. In the next scene, Seo had already entered the portal where the twin girls had been before. Then a voice starts speaking, saying that they are all still novices and that it is even fun to see them getting stronger. Next, our hero enters the system's gel to disable communication, and the voice says that the young man had noticed them. In the midst of that situation, Seo wonders what he should call those voices, and if they might be lesser spirits or even ghosts. Seo tries to disable the voices, but the system warns that he doesn't have enough spiritual power, and the voice says that he is quite brave, asking if he wants to be possessed. And the system warns that the guardian of the sword forests offered a possession, and Seo thinks it must have been the territorial god of that demon realm, mentioning that territorial gods are beings that govern a specific region. With the possession of a territorial god, one can become stronger than anyone in that particular realm. However, the god is tied to the region, so as soon as one leaves, the connection will become completely useless. The room was nicknamed the Labyrinth of Swords, and if he accepted the possession, he wouldn't have to worry about getting lost. And then he ends up buying the item on the map of the demon realm, saying that it was everything he needed to locate. thinking that only the borders are available for him to see, but the more he moves around, the more places will be marked on the map. The system warns that there are multiple entrances to the demon realm, and SEO wonders if he is approaching the 4th area, mentioning that the trainers from the protection agency are divided into several areas. A voice asks if CEO is looking for something because he might find it and thinks they are controlling the number of people entering the demon realm to set them against each other. The voice asks if CEO wasn't listening, to which he responds that he will not accept, asking them to stop trying to manipulate him. Soon after, the system warns that the Master of Flames used the item Trace of the Gods, and the emphasized messages would be activated for 10 minutes, where it was definitely recommending that the protagonist accept his offer. That different design system says that all the connected gods are now nothing. Not only that, but it can make a human with the fire attribute much more powerful. Observing the situation, CEO thinks it is quite exciting considering it is rank 7, but still, he will not accept, and the system continues to show that message multiple times. At that moment, a monster appears in the area. In a matter of seconds, SEO defeats it, managing to collect a few more pearls. SEO thinks he needs to collect 1,000, but that doesn't necessarily mean hunting 1,000 monsters, because there are different classes of spiritual stones. Since he wasn't very skilled in his past life, he killed many praying mantises, so he doesn't need to do that this time. Stating that each ghost counts as 10, he should go deeper into that forest. At that moment, Nosoroi steps on something, assuming there are traces of a trap, wondering why there is so much blood in that place. He thinks that in his past life, he became the target of a masked assassin, and by coincidence, Shin saved him because he was in that area. However, she unfortunately ended up losing part of her eye, all of this happening in the midst of this process. That's why he never discovered who that assassin was, mentioning that in that place now there is only Shin's group along with Gojin, which means that blood is probably from the person he is thinking about. Soon after, Nosoroi looks to the side, coming across one of the twins on the ground, apparently unconscious. Seeing this situation, our hero gets angry, advancing towards that guy, ordering him to get away from the girl. The scene shifts to another blonde boy asking what happened to the missing trainer in the ice room and if he had returned, but the girl replies that he hasn't come back. The blonde boy says he is probably dead, and the other man says he expected more from Cheon because he was the first to complete the Hellfire Room. Then the other girl asks if she can look for that specific person, but the blonde boy replies that it's fine because when it comes to the demon realm, they can't interfere even a little. Not only that, but all players signed an agreement in case of death. Changing the subject, the guy says that another area has already produced a person who completed the room of Area 1, mentioning that the first to complete the odd-numbered area rooms definitely has to be them. As time passes, the other guy asks the girl how she will continue doing this central work in such deep mourning due to the death of a single person. And the girl says she has something in mind, stating that she was checking the player list from other areas because they had already organized the files, and among the players, one of them was killing people. Thus, the scene shifts to the protagonist who asks to move away from the blonde, who it's hard to tell if she is number 1 or number 2. The guy asks him to calm down because they need to talk, and the system alerts that it will activate the destiny detection ability. Showing that he is a tertiary human and has a flame attribute, he says he was healing the girl because that is an antidote from the shop. Then CEO asks the other players to lower their weapons as well, starting to analyze all their statistics. Meanwhile, the blonde seems to be in pain, thinking that she really needs an antidote because she was poisoned. Irritated, he asks how he can trust these people, thinking that he definitely should take the girl away. At that very moment, Shin appears at the location, saying that they are definitely not his enemies. Observing the situation, CEO asks for everything to be explained, and the other guy says he will explain everything. She had fallen into a trap they set to hunt monsters, concluding that she didn't know there were people in that area, apologizing for what happened. In any case, they took her to that place to take care of her, and had just returned there after uninstalling all the traps that were set in that area. Observing the situation, CEO thinks that man must be good with poisons and traps, and also seems to be the strongest person in the group, but considering the abilities, it's quite suspicious. Yet he is still too weak to hurt Shin. Our hero then lowers his sword, thinking that since he doesn't know who the killer is, he will have to be careful with everyone. Soon after, he grabs the blonde by the arm, asking if the treatment is done because he will take her with him, thinking that even if none of them were the killer, it's too dangerous to be out there with a person from Area 4. Thus, the scene shifts location, and CEO's group had already set up a cabin, and Shin comments that it gets dark there pretty quickly. Soon after, one of the twins hugs Shin, saying she has never slept in the woods before. Her sister appears, calling her a coward, and the blonde too asks if she isn't afraid of that monster-filled forest. And hearing this, the girl falls silent, and soon after, CEO throws a kind of pill, which then starts to burn, saying it's supposed to ward off monsters, bought from the system shop. The two twins are surprised, saying the guy is quite smart and strong, asking what he would think about being their master. Hearing this, our hero is perplexed. The two apparently wanted that quite a lot, starting to argue about who would really be the boy's student. He then responds that he won't teach anyone anything, asking them to stop fighting already. And at that very moment, a voice appears in the protagonist's head, asking why he got involved with him. Quickly, Shin realizes that the protagonist was different. The two twins ask what CEO was doing, to which he replies that there was a noise in that place. For that reason, he will sleep far from there, asking them not to worry and not to wait for him. And hearing this, the three fall silent. SEO, for his part, wonders what he was doing because he should actually distance himself from them. Not only that, but he has many things to resolve, saying that the egg must be very hungry, giving it some leaves to eat. However, the system says that the egg simply rejected it, warning that it required meat, but the protagonist simply ignores it, forcing the poor egg to eat that plant. the scene changes with Seo seeing the girls from his group, and a voice asks why he returned, and the other replies that she must have been worried about her friend. And out of nowhere, those voices start talking about tsunderes, and the protagonist thinks he can't take it anymore and will have to disconnect that communication somehow. Meanwhile, those two twins continue to argue, which is the same old thing. And hearing that discussion, our hero smiles, thinking that it reminds him of the Flying Tiger sect because he used to fight all the time with blonde number 1. And back then, Shin just laughed at their fights. That's why that was his daily life at the time. Mentioning that he will be busy, but thinks that the Flying Tiger sect will also have a pretty hectic life. It's a bit annoying and good at the same time, stating that this view is very comforting. But at that very moment, our hero senses a different smell, and the scene shifts to a monster that apparently sensed the same odor. Several bears appear at the location, heading towards the cabin where Shin was. Quickly, our hero climbs down from the tree. Shin is surprised by what is happening, wondering if something happened by chance, and our hero asks if they checked the area while he wasn't there, and Shin replies that they did not. Soon after, Seo picks up a kind of fruit, and the system alerts that it is a demonic peach, which could attract all monsters with its aroma, thinking that he didn't see any fruit basket nearby and someone probably placed it there on purpose, assuming that it was likely that assassin who must have an invisibility technique. And soon after, the twin mentions that Gojin had passed by earlier. Seo asks if it wasn't actually a stranger who came from another area, but the twin responds that it was indeed Gojin, asking if he did anything, and besides that, she noticed he was staring at her for a long time. Observing the situation, our hero is surprised, wondering if Gojin really is the assassin. Even so, he doesn't know what that lunatic was thinking, saying that there are several fruits that attract demons around. Shin asks if he is saying that someone was intentionally trying to put them in danger, and our hero says he is sure of something, because they need to be careful with the humans who are advancing, and putting his sword in its sheath, he says he will take care of all those fruits. But at that very moment, Seo notices something different, thinking he felt a different presence, but it had already disappeared. The scene then shifts to Gojin, who thinks he is really feeling very bored, thinking that everything is trash because there are no rivals, friends, or even enemies in that place, where there are only low-level demons wondering what their true role really is. A flashback appears in his mind with one of the twins asking how the protagonist could be strong, and the other saying she didn't think he could defeat Yeti. From afar, Gojin is surprised by what he heard, thinking that he managed to defeat a boss-level demon that he hadn't even encountered, and he was also the first to defeat the Ice Room, rescuing someone, wondering how a guy like that was defeated by the boss in the Hellfire Room. At that very moment, he realizes something, assuming that the protagonist probably led the boss in his direction to be just a tool, where Seo is someone who returned from the future and therefore knows all the strategies and rewards. And irritated, he thinks that if everything is true, it really makes sense. For this reason, he needs to find the protagonist quickly. Thus, the scene shifts to our hero who is unlocking the map area, walking through that forest. The voice asks why he is staring at the map, as that is his specialty, and Seo says they didn't even tell him who left the demonic peaches around those tents. However, the god says that they couldn't even see who it is. Still, he asks what he was looking for, and the other voice questions if it was that thing. At that very moment, the system alerts that he has concentrated on searching for a long time, and his senses have increased to class 25. For this reason, they became sharper, and at that very moment, our hero smells human blood, starting to activate his sealing destiny ability. At that very moment, he ends up finding someone on the ground, being surprised by what he saw. At that very moment, he draws his sword along with his fire ability, starting to battle with an unknown monster. And that monster says that if someone faints, they should check if everything is okay, instead of drawing their sword. However, the protagonist, calling him a killer, asks him to just be quiet. Observing the situation, the guy says that Seo understands things very quickly, asking how he knew he had killed that guy before. Then he removes his mask, saying that he definitely cannot leave witnesses, starting to advance towards Seo, who realizes that the attributes of that kid have doubled since the last time. And as he begins to flee, he asks how many people he had killed. Hearing this, the guy smiles, asking if he can tell that he has killed several people. The protagonist questions why he is happy about this, and if hunting demons hasn't been enough. But Yojum says he also had fun killing demons and that's why he tried to stay calm. However, Lord Nachal gave him this power to kill people, asking if it wouldn't be a waste not to use it. Seeing the protagonist, Yojum asks if he is angry, questioning if he had a power that could be activated by killing people, wouldn't he do the same thing? At that very moment, he disappears, and our hero says that he keeps talking as if everyone does this, but he is completely wrong. In the next scene, he thinks that guy has a skill that makes his body transparent. However, just because he can't see him doesn't mean he should think he'll get out of that place easily. Surprisingly, Seo manages to defend the attack. Confused, Yojum asks how he blocked that with his skill, claiming that it will be much more worthwhile to kill the protagonist now, questioning how strong he could consider himself for defeating the boy. Seo thinks he can't let things continue like this, mentioning that he is a bit worried for never having used the skill he has hidden until now. This skill he stole from the Yeti before. It heats his senses with the spirit of combat, and if the opponent is stronger, it will increase the user's attributes to make up the difference. And at that very moment, the boy activates this specific skill, and the system warns that it was obvious that Guy is much stronger than Seo. Concluding that his senses will start to boil with the spirit of combat, our hero changes his expression, asking if he really has the courage to consider himself strong. And Yojum, observing the situation, seems to feel fear, asking what had happened all of a sudden. Seo then moves towards the boy. Delivering a strike with his blade, Yojum manages to defend. However, the protagonist quickly invokes his fire skill, landing a solid hit, but still, he ended up receiving a sword in his chest. Yojim was apparently very injured, wondering why he couldn't dodge the attack, but it is already too late. At that very moment, Yojim appears at the scene saying he had come to help. The protagonist then starts to stare at the boy, noticing a kind of aura surrounding his body, supposing that boy is indeed someone stronger than him. At that very moment, he begins to advance towards Yojim, who then asks if Yojim was doing some kind of recruitment for companions, and defending the attack, questions what he could do in that situation, mentioning that he had lost his senses for being overtaken by a wrong power, concluding that he cannot allow the boy's mind to be controlled like that. At that very moment, he manages to knock out the protagonist, who, surprised, asks if it really worked. Not only that, but the villain was fleeing, thinking that this was not the right moment to defeat him. Approaching the protagonist, he asks if he is okay, questioning if they are companions. Our hero uses the recovery potion, asking to look for the other people. However, Gojin says he liked the protagonist because all the others are idiotic background characters. All of this without any personality or even a story. Handing the sword to Seo, he says he wanted to be a protagonist like him. That's why he wanted them to make peace. Thus, the scene shifts to that invisible guy, who thinks he needs to get rid of all the witnesses. But now he has two of them, and both are so strong that he can't even think about facing them. Wondering what he was doing, he suddenly finds a group of players, who thinks he just needs to get a little stronger. At that very moment, the guy approaches the group, and one of the girls notices Yojun saying they were worried about not being able to find him, mentioning that they found a body in the forest that seemed to be human, and Yojun says he was also looking for them but ended up hitting his head. At that very moment, he falls, feeling a bit of pain. The other guy asks where he got hurt because he could heal him. Yojun then thanks him for the help. In the next scene, we can only see blood. The guy who was helping Yojun was already on the ground. The system warns that it would steal 10% of the attributes from each opponent. Also, the god called Fear of the Living and the Dead is pleased with his performance and will therefore receive some rewards. Receiving a necklace, the system warns that his strength will be increased by 10%. Happy, Yojun says he will be able to kill the protagonist, thus thanking the god of the living and the dead for all this. Soon after, it starts to rain, and the system warns that a buildup of water element is forming around him. Not only that, but that type of element defines his fate. All his attributes will be reduced by 10%, but another god of the system asks him not to worry, because Seo's attribute is fire and is probably weakened too. Yojun says he was happy because he has the same weakness and therefore needs to find him before the rain gets stronger. Then the scene shifts to Seo, who is cutting down some trees. Soon after, Yojun appears at the scene using his invisibility skill. Our tired boy says he just has one last tree left. In a matter of seconds, Yojun charges at the protagonist, who then manages to defend against the surprisingly swift attack. Yojun is also surprised by what has happened, wondering what could happen now, and our hero seemingly observes his sword with a different expression. Yojun charges once more, asking if he still thinks he is weak. Seo, in turn, manages to defend the attack again. Yojun says that if he had known Seo was so weak, he would have killed fewer people. Not only that, but he is surprised to be able to do just that, starting to unleash a series of attacks on the boy. Yojun asks what he is laughing at, but at that moment, he receives an attack, and the system alerts that Seo's attribute has been changed to water. As a consequence, his attributes return to normal. The system warns that the energy of the water element accumulates around him, and with the attribute bonus, Seo's attributes would be increased by 10%. Amid that battle, Yojun is surprised, wondering if Seo shouldn't have weakened because of that rain as well, saying that his attribute is also fire. However, Seo says that this was just what the other god of the undead had said. Then the system alerts that the god of the undead had stated that he definitely cannot be deceived, because even with the attribute restrictions, Yojun is still stronger than the protagonist. Hearing this, Yojun says he doesn't know how Seo managed to change to the water attribute, and at that moment he manages to break Seo's sword, saying that even so, he is stronger, throwing Seo towards a tree, charging once more at the boy. About to finish him off, he says that he had entertained him quite a bit, but still, he won't be left alone, because he will make sure to kill all of his friends too. But surprisingly, Yojun ends up being hit by something. It is revealed that Seo had a twig up his sleeve, saying that he will see who will kill whom. Soon after, Yojun is disappointed, saying he was defeated by a mere twig. However, the protagonist says that it is not just a mere twig. In the midst of that situation, Yojun begs for help from the god of the undead, but Seo says it is already too late, delivering the final blow to the boy. After that, Seo is the victor of the battle, saying that the god will regret getting involved in this. He begins to use his destiny theft ability. Thus, time passes, and Seo continues to advance through that forest, defeating various monsters, thinking that he couldn't believe he had won those things. First, he won a twig-shaped sword that was made from a divine tree. Not only that, but he had to search throughout the demon world to find this specific item, knocking down all the trees around. Not only that, but he even placed a lightning rod on top of one of the trees to see if he could find more easily. After that, he also managed to acquire Yojim's skills and equipment, concluding that somehow his destiny class had increased. But at that moment, a voice begins to echo in his head, saying that he had killed him. Then someone appears in that place, starting to call for Seo. It is revealed to be Gojum, asking why he is killing those things and if the reason was Yojum. A flashback appears in Seo's mind, saying that they are not friends, mentioning that he lost the chance to kill that guy because of Gojum. However, Gojum asks if he could finish him off again later and what he needed to do to earn his trust. Seo thinks that now that Zeon is dead, he expected Gojum to show up there, and maybe he should take this chance to feel safer. So he ends up accepting the offer, saying he will have to do everything he says. Gojum surprisingly accepts the offer, asking what he wants him to do first. and the protagonist asks to get his map of the demon world, mentioning that there is an entrance to another area there, and he wanted him to stay there protecting it. The scene returns to the present with Gojum saying that he had gone several days without news from Seo, but because of that, he decided to return, thinking everything was completely resolved. Seo says he still hasn't found what he was looking for, wondering if he had just run away. Soon after, Gojum approaches the protagonist, saying they should finish this quickly because he knew it was him who had killed him, asking if Seo got that item from the guy's body, to which he replies that the necklace was a gift from the gods and his blade had broken, concluding that he had to buy another one at the shop. Moreover, he doesn't know what happened to Yojum. Gojum says that if he says so, he will accept it, but if he had killed him, he could tell him. After all, they were already on the same team. An awkward silence follows this. Seo then tells him to forget it, asking him to stop forcing that friendship. Gojum asks if he wanted him to collect spiritual pearls, congratulating Shin since he had landed the first blow. Soon after, the protagonist begins to watch Gojum walking away. Even so, he continued to collect those pearls, and the system alerts that he had completed the mission. The scene then shifts to the protagonist with someone calling him, asking to accept him as his disciple. However, our hero coldly just declines. It is revealed that it is those twins who kept insisting, saying they have a divine contract. Hearing this, our hero is surprised and quickly uses his ability to assess destinies. Twin number 1 says that her contract is with the Moon Huntress, and the other, whom I think is the younger one, says it is with the archer who shoots the sun. Seo thinks that they made contracts with the gods Apollo and Artemis, saying that those gods really suit them, and the twins ask if he will accept them as disciples. Then the protagonist replies that they need to ask permission from the gods, not from him. Curious, the blonde number 2 asks who Seo's guardian god is. He replies that he actually has no divine contract, because there is no god who wants to evaluate him. The twin is surprised, asking what would happen if he had a contract with the father of the gods and humans, because they would end up having guardian gods from the same group. Soon after, her other sister covers her mouth to stop the explanation, saying that her sister also didn't want to make a divine contract and didn't think Seo would act the same way. Then Seo says he thought it wasn't time to make a contract and that he won't be their master. The twin then looks surprised, wondering if her eyes had deceived her and if there was any reason why he hadn't made a divine contract yet. Soon after, Seo says he had mentioned this before but doesn't have enough skill to teach them. At that moment, the three hear a noise, and a guy comes out of a portal in the ground. The twin starts to observe that guy, and the protagonist quickly stands up, saying that he is the guy from the first room. Time passes with Seo asking the guy if everything is okay and then thanking him. Our hero questions if he still hasn't managed to catch the demon beasts, and the guy replies that he hasn't, because they scared him a lot, mentioning that a awakened who can't kill demon beasts is a complete shame. Surprisingly, our hero then offers to help him hunt those beasts, leaving the little blonde surprised by what he had heard. The twins get excited, saying they will go too, and Seo says that if they want to go along, they will also have to hunt, and besides that, they should stop calling him master, stating that they should think about whether they will really accept them, thinking that helping that man is no bother at all because he wanted to do something similar to what Gojun did in his past life. Then he says he definitely has to help others. Soon after, Seo starts analyzing the statistics of the guy named Johan, who is of the tertiary dragon rank with the earth attribute. Not only that, but he has an exceptional healing attribute, and the protagonist asks if they should go soon. Thus, the scene shifts to another location with a guy telling his boss that he seemed to be in a great mood. And the little blonde says it was because the first to complete the raid was from his area. The other guy says they had a much better time than Area 1, and the little blonde replies that yes, and that's great. At that moment, the other guy says that the team captain princess is in that location. The girl then appears in the place, saying she heard the news and came to congratulate him, asking if Areas 1 and 2 will meet next time, and the little blonde replies that it's a possibility. Then Selman asks if he wants to make a bet to see which area will have the fastest attacker in the next difficulty, and whether it will be the awakened from his area, Captain Timmy Gong's, or his. In the next scene, the little blonde asks what she wants, and Selman suggests that the loser must grant any wish, asking if he is, perhaps afraid to make this bet. The guy then gets irritated, saying he wasn't afraid because his team is going to win, and Selman asks if they are really going to bet, and the guy easily accepts. Leaving, Selman says he can hardly wait for the result, mentioning that they will see each other soon. Right after, she leaves the room. The blonde boy gets excited, saying that his team must win at all costs. Not only that, but he will also need to take some special measurements. In the next scene, the protagonist was distributing some spiritual pearls. As a result, that guy managed to complete the specific mission, asking how Seo managed to get so many pearls in just 2 days, thanking him for everything he had done. But Seo says he also worked hard using his healing ability. However, the priest says that it was nothing, and Seo replies that it actually helped him a lot. Each person helps with the skills they have, mentioning that people still do not recognize the priest's value, asking if they should prepare to head to the 5th room. Then they exit the portal, and Seo asks if he has received the message because the next room won't end as quickly as this one, and they should prepare even more. The advanced group entered there 5 days ago, so they should enter the next day. Thus, the scene shifts to another location. Seo had already entered that portal, and the priest, looking to the side, notices that there was water there. He was surprised by what he saw, saying that the place is very beautiful and he can't believe it is a demonic area. At that moment, a system appears stating that he entered the Room of the Great Tongue, and the Room of the Great Tongue has conditions for special conclusions. There are 3 rules. The first is that the reward varies with the difficulty, and the use of windows is prohibited. Lastly, it is only possible to leave the area when the attack has been completed. Seo, seeing these rules, thinks that because of the last condition, he went through tough times in his past life. The priest asks if he won't tell them what the conditions are, and the protagonist replies that no, because they will have to discover personally what the mission's objective is. The priest asks why there are so many secrets there, and if it's because of the room's name, but the protagonist replies that it's not that, because in fact, it was because they need to literally show their tongues. In the next scene, Seo was already setting up the tent, and the priest is surprised by the protagonist's skill, saying he was wondering why he had prepared so much, and Seo says it was a great idea to do all this in advance, saying he will take a walk and see what is in that area, asking the priest to stay there waiting. The boy starts to leave, thinking that now that his lodging is ready, he needs to go look for food. Soon after, the boy finds a lake. The scene shifts to another location with a guy saying that it gives him a very artificial feeling. Not only that, but it is also being protected by many demonic beasts, wondering if there is something bad mentioned here, or they die, or go back to Shim's camp. The other guy gets irritated, asking them to stop talking about it because he would rather die than go back to that camp, thinking that he cannot bow to the person who betrayed him, and just remembering that makes him angry. Soon after, the guy says they will kill the demonic beasts and get the fruits, mentioning that they have to take advantage while they still have strength. His companion questions if he won't go with them again, because if he was going to act like that, he shouldn't have bought a weapon, and the other guy says he shouldn't have hired them if he was going to expose himself anyway, stating that they didn't receive his money for that, ordering him to attack those monsters right away. The group then does what the guy asked. He asks if they have already killed them all, and the other guy says it seems so. The young man then orders them to grab the fruits and get out of there before other demonic beasts show up. At that moment, he seems to notice something, wondering why that demonic beast is so thin. This is very strange, because there are many fruits in that place, and a voice says yes, mentioning that if they eat the fruits, the master would rip out their tongues. The young man is confused, but the voice says that he is not a very good man, asking the guy to run quickly, and at that moment, a creature appears in the area. Moreover, it was accompanied by its army. Desperate, the other guy tells his companions to flee, starting to leave to avoid being caught by those creatures. His group begins to run faster, and the guy asks them to wait because they have to protect him. Still, it was useless because the guy was already caught by the monster, but at that moment, someone lands an attack on him, talking about not knowing if he believes in luck. It is revealed that it is the protagonist saying that surely the guy was lucky, but in any case, he should be more careful in the future. Soon after, that guy recognizes the protagonist, realizing that it was he who had made him go through all this, asking if he had asked for help before, and if he thought he would forgive him just for having helped him once. However, the protagonist asks him to stay calm because he wouldn't help him even if he knelt down and begged. At that moment, more players appear in that location, and Seo asks if he doesn't think it would be better to leave that place. The guy's group asks if he is okay, apologizing because they didn't know what had happened a little while ago. Still, it's great that the guy managed to survive. The guy with a threatening look says he won't let that go. Meanwhile, our hero was defeating all those monsters. One then advances from behind him, but Seo uses his fire magic to attack him. Looking around, he wonders if they are all gone, mentioning that he needs to feed that thing soon while there is no one around. That egg starts observing the monsters, seemingly wanting to eat them. Orem, the protagonist, says he is going to eat that fruit, who then starts to eat it. After that, the scene shifts to another location with the priest asking if that is the thigh of a demonic beast, and Seo replies that yes, asking if he hadn't asked for help before, and the priest replies that yes, but he still doesn't know what to do to repay him. Soon after, Seo eats that meat. The priest meanwhile seems to be desperate about something. Seo says that all the demonic beasts there are completely poisonous. For this reason, he should repay him by healing him. In the next scene, Seo had already recovered from the poison. The boy continued to eat that meat, and the priest asks why he is doing this. Moments later, the protagonist says he had already gotten used to that weak poison, concluding that it is better to start eating the raw meat. Thus time passes, and the boy was healing himself several times and each time getting poisoned, saying that he finally achieved what he wanted, thanking the priest for his hard work. Sometime later, the priest had already fallen asleep, and the protagonist says that he had worked very hard, thinking that it took longer than he imagined to acquire that ability where he would be able to resist various poisons and not be affected by the poisoned effect. Still, it's good that he gave several magical power items to the priest before doing this, and if he hadn't done that, the guy would have fainted from exhaustion after using so much magical power. Next, our hero tries to wake the priest, thinking that since he worked so hard, he wanted to let him rest a little longer. However, they wouldn't even have that chance. Time passes again, and Seo was fighting against a human, and the priest asks what had happened. Seo says he already knew those guys would show up there, stating that they were definitely being attacked, saying he will go out and face them, asking the priest to stay inside, and if he happens to be in danger, just shout. The boy leaves the cabin thinking that they are faces he doesn't recognize, wondering if they are people from the first area. One guy says he just wants a little food, and if he does that, he will let him live, and the other man says they are thieves, not murderers. Seo says that if they eat the food from this area, they will die, and he is also not any kind of murderer, thinking that even in his previous life, the first area caused problems, asking what will happen if he doesn't want to hand over his food. The group starts to advance on Seo, saying they will have to take it by force, striking the boy, who manages to dodge, where soon after he grabs the boy by the head, kneeing him in the face. In the midst of that situation, the Bosseroi thinks it is quite strange, because with those skill levels, they should be able to find enough food around that place, wondering if they are trying to control the other areas around. While battling with the protagonist, the other guy says he is quite strong, concluding that they should go back and inform the captain. At that moment, they throw a kind of bullet. It is revealed that it was a smoke bomb. Thus, the scene shifts to the priest, who at that moment hears an explosion. He wonders if Seo is okay, but soon remembers that the protagonist had asked him not to leave there under any circumstances, wondering what will happen if he goes out and why Seo told him to stay in that place, where he will probably just end up hindering the boy in his fight. Still, he can't stay hidden for that long. But at that very moment, the protagonist opens the tent, saying that they used the smoke bomb to escape, and the priest asks if he got hurt, but Seo replies that he is fine. The priest asks why they would have attacked them, and Seo says it was to try to steal their food. Mentioning that in the last demon zone they had many conflicts with other areas, he thinks this time will be similar, so it's better to stay alert at all times. Observing the situation, the priest asks if he wouldn't have been better off not bringing him along to this place, because all he does is be a dead weight, asking what the point is in completing his duties while always being helped by others. Also questioning the reason why people who don't want to fight have skills, while the protagonist, in the meantime, doesn't understand anything and asks what he is talking about. He then puts a hand on the priest's shoulder, asking what he had said before, mentioning that people simply can't recognize their own worth yet, stating that if they return to the lobby, the totems will heal them, and they also receive medicine daily, asking what happens after the work is done, asserting that things will really start then. And when people see how expensive the regeneration pills are in the store, he is sure that everyone who expelled him from the groups will bitterly regret it. In summary, Seo can fight, and meanwhile, the priest can heal people. He doesn't like trying to predict the future, but he is sure that with his skills, he will still save many people, asking if he still wants to give up in that place. The priest then gets motivated, saying that he will definitely continue, asking to keep going or to help. Soon after, the protagonist agrees, saying that he also needs him to continue helping. Time passes again to 3 days later, and the scene shifts to those two twins. Shin says they did a good job, asking if they found anything. Blondie 1 replies no because she thinks they will still need to go deeper, and Blondie 2 says everyone there is too weak to help. However, Shin asks them not to say that, because everyone is helping, and the Blondie, who I think is number 1, says her sister agrees with that. She says it would definitely have been better to go with their master because they could learn a lot, starting to reminisce about the moments she had with Seo, saying that he probably went much deeper while they were there, and Shin replies that until Mr. Seo is back, they will continue to do their best. The twin asks when he will return, and the girl replies that she doesn't know, and he might even come back that day. But at that very moment, the three hear a noise. Someone then opens that tent. Shin is surprised by what she sees, and it is revealed that Gojum is at the location. Feeling disappointed because she thought it was Seo, the twin asks how he managed to get there without triggering his alarm traps. Shin asks why he is in that place since the guy always walked alone, and Gojum replies that he just came there to look for the protagonist, mentioning that he thought he would be there because the gods are only talking about his arrival, but Shin says she hasn't found him yet. Soon after, Gojum asks if Seo can show up and end that camp of extras, and the other twin, frustrated, asks what he is talking about. Gojum says that they are both side characters, but there are still other useless ones outside. Shin, irritated, asks if that is really what he thinks about people's lives. Soon after, Gojum hands a passion fruit to the girl, and the system notifies that she completed the Revelation Room mission. Shin asks if he has already grown tired of eating passion fruit. He replies that he thought she would have noticed, but he was just trying to be nice to her. Soon after, an arrow nearly hits him, and Gojum says they are still side characters. The twin asks if he really thinks they would still want to be friends with someone like him, but Gojum asks her to calm down, saying he thought they left him no choice but to resort to force. But at that very moment, Shin ends up breaking that passion fruit, saying that it would be better for him to give up before he also resorts to force. Hearing this, Gojum is surprised. Soon after, grabbing the sheath of his sword and drawing it, he says he can't face Seo at that moment, mentioning that fighting her will keep him entertained for now, where it will definitely be a very interesting fight. Then, another girl appears in the tent, saying that someone is cooking demon beasts in that direction. The group is then surprised by what they heard. Gojum says he was happy to have gone to that place, asking where those people are. Ah yes, the scene shifts to the person who was cooking. The guy thinks that it has been 10 days since the advanced team went there, and the food they brought from outside must have run out, mentioning that the only edible things in that demonic area are those fruits, along with the poisonous meat of the demonic beasts. It is revealed that it is the protagonist who thinks that the value of real food in that place must be sky high. At that moment, Gojum appears in a location, and beside him was Shin. The protagonist then just greets the girl, who says that almost everything in that area is poisonous. But Seo asks not to worry, claiming that he managed to purify the poison, handing a soup to Shin, who is surprised by what she heard. But soon after, Gojum takes the bowl, saying he will eat in the girl's place. However, Seo says that each portion costs 1,000 spiritual pearls. Gojum says it is very expensive, but still wants just one, and Shin also says she wants another, but the protagonist says that for her it will only be 200 pearls. Gojum, frustrated, asks why her price is different from his, and Seo replies that the owner is the one who decides that. After that, the two take their bowls, but even in that, Gojum had a certain disadvantage. Time passes again, and the whole group was eating. Our hero asks if the two are trying to find high-quality items around there, and Shin says yes, and that's why she wanted to ask for his help. Seo asks what Gojum wants, who replies that things are not going very well because of Zone 1, but he thought it was worth trying to join them, because he believes it will be easier than fighting against those extras, and Shin replies that they need to stick together in a situation like this. The two start to argue again, and the protagonist says he thought it would be better to form a group only with Shin, leaving Gojum frustrated with what he heard. Time passes again. Seo says it doesn't matter because he won't take everyone, and Shin replies that it will be difficult to face Zone 1 alone, asking if he doesn't find it strange that everyone is trying to attack them. and every time they encountered fights occurred. SEO is surprised by what he heard, thinking he must be able to gather information about the situation in the first zone, claiming that taking the priest might be very difficult, asking him to stay at that camp. The priest says that the two cannot go alone, but the protagonist says that if the priest goes, he will probably just get in the way, asking if he can really stay there, because it will be much safer, and promises that there will be many opportunities to use his skills again. The priest then agrees, and Seo says he will need to find out more information alone. Starting to leave, Shin says that if anything happens, they will be waiting there to help. Sana goes to another location, and a voice says that Seo has gotten stronger, and the other replies that the demonic beasts there are very weak, and that they should go to the deeper part. Meanwhile, Seo was walking calmly, thinking that the blue fruits are finally starting to appear, even if slowly, and at that moment, our hero feels a different aura, noticing that something was different beside him. At that moment, a tree falls beside him, and Seo thinks that something like that was approaching and he didn't even notice, wondering where that monster came from, that at the same moment appears in front of him, and then uses his hermit skill. The monster, in turn, becomes confused, because Seo simply disappeared out of nowhere. It is revealed that the guy was using the invisibility skill he had gained earlier, combining it with his fire skill, managing to land a precise blow on that monster. But still, he cannot use this against the people from the first zone, wondering what he should do now, as he might need to find the place where that monster came from. The system notifies that he received a passion fruit and completed his revelation room mission. SEO thinks he needs to increase his resistance to poisons, assuming that the people from the first zone have already completed at least the intermediate level of the mission. The young man then starts picking several of those passion fruits that were in the orchard. One voice asks if eating this increases his magical power and his resistance to poisons, and the other voice says that's why the Destination Protection Association chose that place. Our hero, meanwhile, continues to eat the passion fruits, ignoring all the voices. Right after that, the system alerts that the skill poison resistance has reached a new level. Then our hero looks down. It is revealed that there were two people in that location, and the other guy asks if he is named Seo and is from the second zone. Surprised, Seo asks how he knew his name, and the guy says that it's not important, mentioning that his captain wants to talk to him and asking what he thought about accompanying them, because if he obeyed and they complained, they could be kind. In the midst of that situation, Seo thinks that those guys must be with the person who attacked him on the first day, but still, he accepts the offer, descending from the tree to discuss with them. Time passes again, and that guy was showing his camp to the protagonist, saying that the captain is at the back, asking him to follow. Looking around, Seo thinks that they have double the people from the second zone, and it seems like everyone is staring at him. Soon after, the boy enters a tent. A man asks if his name is Seo, saying that he is called Hong and is the captain of the first zone, claiming that it's a pleasure to meet him, and the system alerts that he is of primary ghost rank with the gold attribute. Seo thinks that they were still in the fifth room, but he has already gotten a weapon like that, stating that he now understands why the first zone dominated all the attacks in his past life. He asks the guy what he wanted to talk about. At that very moment, he seems to be plotting something, saying that he had to say something very simple, pointing his blade at the protagonist, who is surprised because the boy didn't even move, asking to work alongside him. Then our boy puts his hand on his head, asking if that was all, and it seems he won't be able to meet the requirements. And apologizing, he says he was already leaving. However, the people from the first area end up blocking him. The captain says that he still doesn't understand properly because he has no choice but to cooperate with them, because if he doesn't cooperate, something horrible will happen, and he will be executed immediately. Hearing this, our hero smiles, saying that if they kill him, he is sure they will regret it bitterly. The guy, realizing he was in Seo's hands, is surprised. The system alerts that if the bearer of the talisman is killed by a human, they will be marked with the symbol of vengeance and will become the target of the captain of the Destiny Protection Association team. In the midst of that situation, the captain thinks that this guy is of the same level as the person who sent him that weapon and promised a reward for the attack, asking if he also received a message. A flashback appears in Seo's mind, with the system alerting that he received a message from the princess. He wants to have the highest placement among the challengers, and additional rewards will be given after success, receiving temporary items that will help him in the room attack. The scene returns to the present, and the people around realize that there was some kind of fight happening between the team captains. Soon after, Hong says that this SEO definitely cannot be killed, because he has a very strange item, so if they accidentally kill him, they will end up dead. Concluding that they should retreat, the protagonist asks if he can leave now, but right after, the captain advances towards Seo, saying that they should keep bothering him until he is dead. Seo manages to dodge the attack but has no time to think because the other players are already coming at him. Still, he is confident, saying that he wouldn't have come here if he thought he could be defeated by them, and using only his hand-to-hand skills, he starts taking down player after player. The system then activates his invisibility skill. The players are confused because Seo has simply disappeared, but at the same moment, he appears, knocking out one of his companions. Starting to do the same thing, player by player, the captain says that he is not teleporting or becoming invisible, asking them not to give him an opening to move, but Seo says it's already too late, throwing an apple on the ground, thinking that he only came here because he was curious to discover the reason they fought to the death so much in his past life, supposing it was because of the Destiny Protection Association. And according to what Shin said before, the hostages were taken and even killed. All of this for the rewards of obtaining first place in the overall ranking. He definitely cannot let the same thing happen as in his past life, wondering what he can do. In the next scene, our hero knocks down some passion fruits from his bag, speaking to get attention for a moment because, as everyone already knows, there are people from other areas in that demonic zone. However, last night he ended up discovering that they were planning to attack them later, concluding what he wants to make a suggestion because there is a fruit called Celestial Aroma that could help them complete the attack from that room. For this reason, he will give it to them for free if they agree to leave before they arrive, asking what he thinks of this proposal, stating that there is plenty there for everyone, so he should pass it on to those who remain for the other members who are not present. Our hero starts to leave but stops you to wait, asking if he will also be able to complete the intermediate level. The ignorant CO asks since when what he did was his business. Starting to leave, he says he is not part of his camp, thinking he is sure the girl will calmly get everyone out of there, and definitely in this life, the girl will not be his companion. Thus, the scene goes back to the forest again. CO thinks that was the place where he encountered that monster last time. Not only that, but it appeared completely out of nowhere. However, demonic beasts are not creatures that just appear like that, and since they are creatures that live in the demonic zone, they usually create places where they live. It was as if it were a kind of nest, wondering where that creature might have emerged, but soon after, our hero finds a likely place where this could have happened. Still, he wants to know how they managed to enter that place. At that moment, our hero begins to fall into that crevice, stating that it was much wider than he had thought. After reaching the ground, the boy uses his fire ability to illuminate the surroundings. Then a light appears in front of him. The boy is surprised by what he sees, because there is simply an underground free area that also had some rather peculiar fruits. The protagonist thinks that the creatures use that place as a crossing but have never fought there, because this place is the most dangerous in the entire demonic zone. And observing more closely, he wonders if the demonic beasts are further ahead. The boy begins to analyze the tree, picking a fruit, and the system alerts that he has met one of the completion conditions of the big tongue room, thinking that he just needs to get out of there without being caught and everything will be over. But at that moment, an explosion occurs. The smoke then begins to dissipate. It is revealed that Captain Hong was in that location, thanking for finding that place for them. Our hero asks if they were following, and Hong replies that yes, stating that while they were heading to the camp of the second area, they ended up finding that girl. Even if he couldn't kill him, at least he could kill his companions, but if he gives him the fruit, he can spare his friend's life. Hearing this, the protagonist is surprised, saying that he has nothing to give him. Soon after, he steps on the fruit, saying that if they want the fruit so badly, they should go get it themselves. The guy asks if they heard what the boy said, as he will hold that guy. Meanwhile, they should climb the tree, collecting the fruits, ordering his subordinates to do it quickly. They then become happy, because they could finally get that fruit. Soon after, Seo asks to free the girl, and then the guy asks to lower his blade, stating that he can go get her now, that is, if he thinks he has any kind of courage. Surprisingly, the protagonist draws his blade. Approaching the twin, he starts calling her by her name, throwing a kind of powder into her mouth. Hong asks what that was, and Seo replies that it is an antidote. Hearing this, Hong says that she hasn't even consumed any kind of poison. Soon after, his subordinates fall from the tree, and the guy asks what they were doing. He replies that his eyes were hurting, and not only that, but he also feels dizzy. Hong then becomes surprised, but at that moment ends up spitting blood, and the system alerts that he has been exposed to the scent of the luck fruit for too long. Observing the situation, Seo says that he must be starting to feel the poison about now, leaving Hong surprised by what he heard, wondering why that boy is not being affected, and if by chance he already knew what had happened. A flashback appears in his head. At the moment Seo is giving an antidote to the twin girl, the guy then becomes very frustrated, charging at the boy, begging him to give him the antidote soon, wondering what kind of poison this was. Meanwhile, Seo continues to dodge the attacks. The system alerts that the poison was spreading through the wounds, and the strength of the poison exceeds his resistance to poisons, and therefore he will begin to be enveloped by the poisonous aroma. Seo thinks he won't even be able to wait to see him succumbing to the poison, starting to use his fire ability, and the system warns that the poisonous aroma was being strengthened, and the boy then starts to flee. Irritated, Hong asks if the boy wanted to die with them in that place, but Seo replies that this won't happen. In the next scene, Hong becomes very desperate, begging for mercy, but Seo says that if he wanted to live, he wouldn't have threatened him using his companions. After doing what he did, the boy uses his ability to steal destinies, stealing a part of that guy's strength. Not only that, but magical power and some other abilities, concluding that Seo's destiny level had risen to the tertiary human ranking. In the next scene, Seo takes the hand of the twin girl. A voice says that this is not the time to relax, and surprised, she observes what the protagonist was doing with that egg, apparently giving it food so it could hatch, and the system warns that the growth rate was at 100%. At that moment, the egg hatches, and an unknown creature emerges, starting to observe Seo. Soon after, it approaches him, and the system warns that the purification ability has been activated. A glow occurs after that. That area was apparently stopping being surrounded by that dark aura. The system warns that all the poison from the fruit had been purified. Realizing this in that situation, the protagonist is surprised, saying he did a good job, claiming he will take everything away before they burn, and at that moment, the twin girl wakes up, and Seo says that if she is better, she should help him. Soon after, a hand appears trying to emerge from under that tree, and at the same moment, the other twin, along with Shin, appears in the place. Shin says she was worried because she couldn't find them anywhere. Seo asks what happened and if everything was okay. Shin replies that yes, mentioning that the priest healed everyone, and the twin says that those guys from the first area tried to invade the camp and then ended up fleeing. Her other sister starts arguing with her, asking why she went out alone or why she thought she had been caught by those guys. Seo says she was being held hostage by the captain of Area 1. Hearing this, Shin says she wished she had chased that guy. However, Seo says none of this would have happened if she had completed the intermediate level, asking why they didn't leave. Shin questions how she could leave him alone in that place. Seo says she can't put herself and her friends in danger because of strangers, and Shin, hearing this, asks why the boy is considered a stranger. Because everyone there considers him part of their group, and also a companion, concluding that next time they should fight together. Hearing this, Seo is surprised, and the system warns that the destinies of Seo and Shin begin to intertwine. The twin girl considers him a hero, and their destinies along with the other twin will start to intertwine as well. Seo, realizing what was happening, thinks it was already too late to distance himself from these people. Sometime later, the boy had already exited that portal, opening the system window to claim his reward. The system warns that this is a destiny guide. Seo thinks that the destiny guide is an item that shows the best path or something like that, wondering if it is automatic because he thought it wouldn't be possible to use it as he wishes. At that moment, he notices something, and the system warns that the destiny guide item has been activated. Seo's destiny had begun to change little by little. Thus, the scene shifts to another location, showing a masked man thinking that this is quite strange, stating that the result of Seo's attack is very peculiar. In the treasure room, for example, he completed the hardest level in a single day, and what remained in that room was very suspicious. In the ice hell room, he managed to kill the Yeti, completing the hidden mission, wondering if he was really the one who did all this. Probably the 7-branched sword that disappeared from the weapon room must have been his doing as well. Thinking that if it weren't for that, Hong would have completed the first attack of the revelation room. A flashback appears with a woman saying it would be good to have a wish ticket, asking why. It was so complicated to capture a magical beast. Catching a magical beast requires some tricks, but the chance of catching them with that is practically 0%. Anyway, that is quite strange. Taking a key, he states that he definitely needs to investigate. Moments later, the scene shifts to the protagonist with someone calling him. It is revealed that the little blonde boy is saying they will give him an additional reward as promised. Hearing this, Seo is surprised, wondering if it is a subspace inventory. The little blonde boy says it is literally a subspace inventory that he has been using as personal arsenal. He can choose anything as long as it is just one, and was in that room. Saying once again that he can choose anything. Observing what the protagonist was doing, the little blonde boy thinks it is just a test. He also changed some things in the inventory before they entered. All the weapons are flashy but are all of low quality despite being beautiful. They are made of very common material and none are sold as merchandise because they have all been categorized as junk. And all of this is to see if Seo can really read destinies. If a person does not have this ability, they will not be able to know the specific quality of the item. However, it would be different if Seo were capable of reading destinies. Soon after, our hero begins to analyze a sword. The little blonde boy thinks he could have put a single good weapon there, but mixed several noble class items that are useless, claiming that the team leader is quite intelligent. Seo then seems to be surprised, thinking that the weapon looks very good. However, it was ranked 1. Starting to observe all the swords and weapons around, the boy seems to have noticed something, wondering if this is some kind of test. From the beginning, the guy also seemed suspicious since he was without a mask and gloves, which he always wore, mentioning that it makes sense he must be doing this to see his abilities. However, not many people have the ability to see destinies, and in his past life, he tried to monopolize all of them, concluding that he has to hide his abilities but needs to get a good item, wondering what the most important thing to do is. In the next scene, the little blonde boy asks if he has decided what he wants, and Seo replies that he has, pointing to the weapon he specifically wanted. Hearing this, the little blonde boy is surprised, because Seo was simply pointing at him. The little blonde boy says it was expected of the protagonist, because he mentioned the most valuable thing in that room, admitting that he is a very special person but unfortunately cannot have him, and the protagonist says he was not pointing at him, but rather at the key he is holding, asking to let him borrow all those weapons because it will be much better for him too, because instead of taking something valuable, he will borrow and return the team 2 weapons whenever he wants. Observing the situation, the little blonde boy thinks in silence. Thus, time passes, and the protagonist is already at home feeding that unknown animal, saying it will take 3 days to make a copy of the key, and until then, they will train a bit. Thinking about a dog that would spend 12,000 garden spiritual cores in a single day and barely manages to feed itself selling soup. Continuing to feed the creature, he asks if it was good because it needs to eat and grow a lot. At that very moment, a light begins to emerge. The system says that the magical beast has managed to evolve to the 2nd rank silencer, and a water accumulation ability has been acquired. Concluding that it controls water freely, and the protagonist asks to use his new ability by throwing water in that direction. The creature then begins to do so. A giant water bubble emerges. Seo desperately asks it not to do that, but it is too late because the creature has already launched the water bubble, even making a hole in the wall. In front of him was a player. It is revealed that it was Kang, who recognizes the protagonist. Then the scene shifts to a cafeteria with a group from the 2nd team eating. The other guy says he missed rice, claiming he doesn't want to look at a fruit for a long time, saying that he used to think Seo was a bit strange, but after that mission, he seems like a really nice person. And the other guy says he always thought Seo was a good person because they never really saw him, mentioning that the boy helped him when he was surrounded by demons in the snowy mountains. Even after that, he helped him when he was bitten by a beast. His colleague asks if that happened and the reason he is alone, and the guy replies that he wanted to try going there. At that very moment, the protagonist appears at the location. Choi was by his side, saying he never thought Seo would be the first to complete an attack in a room like that. Seo asks if he was the first to complete any attack, and Choi replies that he was the first to complete the low-level attack in the revelation room. Hearing this, Seo says it's good for the kid. Choi says that at least now they can talk too because the other guys don't even come close to their level. Changing the subject, he says he should eat something. Approaching the counter, he asks the monster for 2 drinks. However, the monster shows that he has no spiritual cores in his possession. Choi tries to make an excuse, saying he would give him the money later, but that's not enough. Frustrated, he asks if he has any idea who he is, but the monster doesn't seem to care. In the midst of that situation, Seo tells the guy to calm down, saying he will buy for him, so he shouldn't yell at the creatures. Choi asks if Seo can pay, to which he replies that he still has some spiritual cores in his wallet. And approaching the counter, he asks how much it is, but the monsters respond that for Seo it will be free because he is a VIP. Choi is confused by what he heard, and Seo explains that it's because he spent over 12,000 points there before, so that must be the reason. Saying he will only want 1 drink, meanwhile, Choi is surprised by the amount of money Seo had spent. Soon after, the creature hands the drink to the protagonist, leaving Choi astonished by what he had seen, apparently irritated by the situation. Soon after, he punches that monster, asking it not to look at him like that. The twins, seeing what was happening, are surprised. Seo asks what he is doing, and Choi tells him to be quiet because he had also betrayed him. The guy starts to walk away, and Seo doesn't understand anything about what had happened. Then the 2 twins appear in a place, and Blonde one asks if the guy is a friend of that man, and the protagonist replies no. Blonde 2 asks why he was talking to the guy, and Seo says he lives in the room next to him, so he asked to have lunch together since he broke his wall. Hearing this, the twin is surprised because she didn't know Seo had a magical beast, and soon after, the boy shows them his beast. The blonde, whom I think is number 2, asks what the beast's name is, and Seo replies that it's simply called Beast since it's a beastly creature, leaving both disappointed, and the other one says she thought he should at least give it a real name. However, Seo is confused about this. Even so, he says it should be called Rini, and the system notifies that her rank has increased to Precious Rank, and the Magnetic Horns ability has been acquired, where she can attract metallic objects to herself or change the direction of the object. Observing this, Seo is surprised, thinking he didn't know she could do something of this magnitude, and the other twin says it was thanks to them that he managed to discover this. Seo replies that this is true, thanking them both for helping him. Then the other twin says that since that's the case, he could go on the next mission with them. Hearing this, Seo is surprised, saying that if the door opens, they should go together anyway. Thus, the scene shifts to a week later, and the system notifies that he has entered the serpent room and must protect a certain thing for 168 hours. The whole group was at the location, and a surprised guy wonders what they should protect since that information is hidden, supposing it's probably that counter. Soon after, a masked guy appears, saying his name is Young, and that he is in charge of that room. Shin asks if she knows anything, and the twin says that stopping to think, there is also a mission window there, like in the other rooms. Meanwhile, Seo is confused, wondering why the masked person is now different from before. Young says they just updated and sent mission details, and even so, he will explain a bit, saying that their mission will be quite simple since they only need to protect a simple snake. More precisely, they will need to tame and protect one of them, using that friendship symbol that is right there and tying it on a piece of cloth around the snake's neck, asking everyone to take one and go look for a snake soon. Thus, time passes again. All the groups were already looking for the snake to tame. Gojo, meanwhile, had already found his snakes, wondering about having an even bigger snake than the ones he had found. Then, a player manages to tame a snake, and the system appears asking to protect it for 168 hours. Choi says that all that's left is to protect this snake, asking them to take care of it for him. He mentions that he entered there before the protagonist, and therefore caught a snake first, and maybe he would be the first to complete the mission in that room. His group is confused, wondering why the guy is after the protagonist. The scene then shifts to our hero, who wonders if this is what they were talking about regarding his destiny starting to change. It must have happened because he was the first to complete the mission in the Revelation Room different from his past life, and they also kept that room closed for a set time. Because they even changed the person in charge this time, but many things changed, concluding that he doesn't even know exactly why. Then the system appears, stating that Seo's destiny has changed, and now will undergo a significant alteration where he could return to normal if he went back to his original place. Observing the situation, Seo wonders if this has anything to do with what he was trying to do. Again, those voices appear, asking what Seo is going to do, and if he's not going to tame a snake. Amidst that situation, Seo thinks that staying there won't help at all, concluding that it's better to leave. Soon after, he removes part of his clothing, calling his creature to his side. Then the protagonist dives into the river, starting to observe below him, and there were several fish underneath. Seo begins to observe his companion, who then starts to shine, and the system alerts that the water accumulation skill has been activated. With that, Seo was affected by the same effect, and can now breathe and move freely underwater, leaving the boy surprised by what had happened. Right after, he looks back and encounters a snake. However, the boy simply ignores it. He begins to go deeper into the river, and a voice says it's impossible to have snakes in that place. But Seo thinks he didn't have the idol to catch a snake because there was something he really wanted, and at that moment, a giant monster appears behind him. But the boy manages to defend himself with his spear. Starting to observe that monster, he asserts that it's too big for a snake and too small for a dragon, and that was exactly what he was looking for, and it's lucky that now he just had to tie the symbol of friendship on it. Starting to take out the cloth that was in his pocket, and looking ahead, he notices a kind of water circle. But just barely, he manages to dodge the attack, all thanks to his animal. That giant monster continues to watch the protagonist, who keeps moving in the water, but then that giant monster lunges at Rini. However, Seo wouldn't let that slide. Charging towards her, he starts to tie her up with that rope, who then successfully does this, and the system alerts that the serpent will obey the boy's orders. The voices are surprised because Seo suddenly tamed a serpent, and the boy then feels happy about what had happened. Moments later, he was already rising to the surface, saying that it was a good job and he needed to protect her for a week. But still, it wasn't like he needed to because the cloth would disappear in a week, and in the meantime, she should try to stay in the water as much as possible. Hearing this, the serpent looks confused, but even so, she dives into the water. Seo, for his part, was very happy, saying he now has a week of vacation. Thus, the scene shifts to another location. Seo, meanwhile, continued to level up by defeating some monsters, thinking that even though his stats are up, it's a shame he can only do this by hunting, calling for his companion to rest a bit, stating that it must be hard for her to hunt with him since she doesn't like blood. At that moment, the boy hears some noises, wondering why there are people fighting there if it's a beginner's room. But at the same moment, he realizes something, starting to run quickly towards the location. Then our hero arrives at a waterfall, noticing someone who was arguing with another person. The other guy says he will return his money right now, asking him not to tell anything more. His companions also leave, saying that the guy was obsessed with the protagonist since he only talked about him. Seo, meanwhile, wonders why they are talking so much about him. A flashback appears in his mind, wondering if Choi was still upset about what had happened earlier. Soon after, Choi looks up, realizing that the protagonist was in that place, asking him to help with his snake. The scene shifts to another location with Seo saying that they were attacked and now he doesn't know where his snake is, and Choi responds that's exactly it. Seo asks if he will be paid to help, and Choi replies that he hasn't even paid for his lunch yet. But soon after, our hero stops running, saying that he definitely does not work for free. Hearing this, Choi has no choice but to say he will pay him 2,000 pearls. Seo is surprised, saying he thought he didn't have any money, but after that, Choi surprisingly makes the transfer. In the next scene, the boy is already approaching a snake that is apparently very injured. A man is about to finish it off. However, the protagonist stops the guy, asking which district Seo is from, claiming he found that snake first and therefore should go after another. The protagonist, in turn, throws that snake away, asking them not to do this. Choi, desperate, grabs his snake. Realizing it is very injured, he begs for it not to be killed. The guy, meanwhile, is not understanding anything. Choi, irritated, asks why they are trying to kill his snake, and the guy still doesn't understand anything. Choi says that the snake has the symbol of friendship, and therefore he should find another snake to protect, and the guy asks why he has to do that. Soon after, Seo says that the mission of the room is precisely to protect his snake, but the guy doesn't understand anything, asking what he is talking about, because his mission, to be specific, was to kill a snake, leaving both surprised by what they had heard. Seo thinks that the mission is different from what it was in his past life, assuming that this change in his destiny meant that, in his past life, everyone's mission was to protect the snakes, and they could cooperate with the people from District 3 to protect them from other monsters. But at that moment, the boy realizes something, and a system alert appears for Seo because someone was attacking his snake, thinking that there is only one person from District 3 who could attack it, claiming that he definitely knows who it is. The scene then shifts to the other boy who wonders if that creature was a dragon, assuming that he will really be able to kill it, completing his mission. But soon after, the protagonist appears on the scene surprised by what he has seen. In the next scene, Jang lands an attack on the snake, thinking that only a few more punches are left to defeat it, but at that moment, Seo appears to stop him. Jang asks what the boy is doing, thinking he knew that was the boy, because he didn't expect to find Jang in that place. A flashback appears in his mind of the moments he had talked to the boy, and he was apparently a friend of the twin, thinking that this was the Jang he had known in his past, and besides being happy, even though he wasn't expecting to see him in that place. Soon after, Jang says it's the first time he sees Seo, claiming he had found that monster first, but Seo tells the creature to go back to the water and not even think about coming up. The monster then does what Seo asked. The guy gets very angry, saying he would kill that monster, and Seo thinks that stopping to observe, it was the first time they were meeting in this life. Not only that, but the boy is quite different from before because in the past, he was much more laid back. Seo thinks that if they had met before, it would have happened like this. Soon after, he asks the boy why he doesn't go look for another snake, claiming that this one is his. But soon after, Jang tries to hit the protagonist, saying he will take care of him first and then defeat that snake. The boy is surprised because Seo dodges, but then tries to make another attack, apparently managing to hit Seo, but in reality, he defended with his sword, thinking that the guy really wasn't joking about his dark past. Then Jang asks why he is laughing, and if he is having fun with this battle, and Seo says it's really cool, thinking that the boy is alive, wondering why he wouldn't smile. Soon after, he puts the fire attribute on his sword, starting to advance towards Jang, thinking that the guy is amazing, and has more strength and skill than him, asking Jang how he is being pressured if he is obviously much stronger. Jang tells him to just shut up, starting to advance towards Seo again, but the protagonist easily lands a punch on the guy, thinking that he probably won that battle just because he knows the guy's attack pattern. Soon after, Jang asks if he doesn't think they should stop there, and observing the situation, the man falls silent. Then he starts to walk away and the protagonist just waves back at the guy, thinking it's a problem, because if it continues like this, he might not get close to the twin girl, concluding that they will not see each other in the secret gate guild again, and if they end up meeting Chin in that version, he will probably be killed. Thus, time passes again, and it starts to get dark. The protagonist then begins to approach a masked person, greeting the guy who says he could ask him anything. Jang questions if their goal was not to help people awaken their blessings, why they created a deliberate confrontation between the districts, and the masked guy says they were just trying to heat things up a bit for some challengers who are not that skilled, yet asking if he didn't benefit earlier by receiving an item from a guardian, questioning why he was complaining. Besides, they didn't do anything wrong that time, concluding that Seo will be able to leave that room quickly if he cooperates a bit with the situation. Time passes again and Seo, near a bridge, wonders if anything had happened while he was away, impressed that no notification appeared about his snake being attacked soon after. The boy hears a noise and quickly draws his sword. An explosion happens after that, and something seemingly starts to approach the boy again. Another explosion occurs, and the protagonist dodges with a jump. A fist appears in that spot, revealing that it was a human. It was Seo, who says he was looking for the protagonist, questioning if he wanted something from him, advancing towards the boy. He says he wants to return what Seo had done before our hero manages to defend the attack with his sword again, thinking that he just needs to do the same thing he did before. But at that moment, he receives a kick, and the protagonist thinks that the boy was moving differently because he changed his attack pattern after realizing he was blocking everything, mentioning that this was also a habit of his in fights. Concluding that nothing really changed in the past, Seo happily says he finally hit him. Seo asks why he wants to fight him, and Jang replies that it was because he had been defeated before, because he definitely doesn't like losing to someone. Hearing this, Seo remains silent, thinking that he loved fighting with people stronger than him before, and even in his past life, he wasn't a worthy opponent for him still. It's too strange to be happy to finally see him this way. Still, he can't die, or else his snake will be in danger. And soon after, the protagonist imbues fire into his sword, starting to fight seriously. He asks if the guy is ready. The system warns that the fighting instinct has been activated, and within seconds, the boy's vision starts to blur. Jong then begins to advance towards the protagonist, who just observes quietly and advancing towards the guy. He says he is really strong, thinking that he likes to fight this way, because killing strong people is truly amazing, and with a smile on his face, the protagonist continues to fight Jong. Meanwhile, doesn't understand anything, wondering what was happening because the guy had been aiming for his vital point since they started the fight, assuming that he really wants to kill, and if he continues like this, he will lose again. Then he delivers a punch to the protagonist's stomach, apparently managing to inflict internal damage. Our hero even coughs up blood, thinking that he has to kill the guy. Multiple internal voices echo in his mind, saying that he really has to take the guy's life, wondering how he should do that. In the next scene, Jang was about to finish off the protagonist, but he manages to defend the attack, saying that his consciousness had finally returned just in time. At that moment, he invokes his flaming ability, surrounding his body with flames, saying that he was thinking of a way to kill him. Then Jang says he broke one of his bones, asking how he was still standing. However, the protagonist says that no one could stop him when he is in that state, telling the guy to just die already. Time passes again, and Yang seems to be surprised by something, and after an intense battle, the guy says he will finally give up the system, then appears to Seo, saying that due to lack of mana, the fighting instinct ability has been deactivated. The boy says he didn't win, but they should still consider it a draw, starting to leave. He asks to give up and go look for another snake to complete his mission. However, Jang says that the next day he will come back, and even if he loses again the next day, he will return, concluding that one day he will manage to defeat the protagonist. Thus, the scene shifts to our hero, who is apparently entering a portal, thinking that Jang is a very persistent guy who hates losing. In the next scene, several people were discussing how some players from other districts were trying to kill their snakes to complete their own missions. The masked girl says that the mission is to protect the snakes, and if they fail to complete their mission, they must understand that they will be disqualified as soon as the mission period ends. In the next scene, our hero sits in a spot, starting to heal. At that moment, he notices something. He then calls for his captain, beginning to whisper in her ear. Hearing this, the girl smiles, saying that it is definitely possible for this to happen. Time passes again, and Seo thinks it is practically impossible for him to lose that mission. Without wasting time, our hero summons his creature, saying it is time to hunt. In the next scene, the boy is already facing Jang, starting to battle him again, while time is already passing with 75 out of 168,000 hours spent. Seo continues to fight, even reaching 100 hours of his snake being protected. After a while, they finally reach 145 hours, and Jang is still being defeated by the boy, who, irritated, asks why his body looks like a fireball every time. Seo says that his ability will clearly keep being used, and Jang asks if he needs that to use against him every single day. As he starts to leave, he asks him to wait for him the next day. Meanwhile, that snake was watching the guy leave. Our hero, surprised, says he asked her to stay hidden, asking if she happens to be hungry. Handing her food, he says that is all he has, and that she shouldn't show up there again while he is out, whispering not to tell his creature that he gave her that food. Not only that, but he will give her more later. In the next scene, the two twins appear at the location, asking what he was doing, and the protagonist says he was taking care of his snake. Blonde Twin 2 asks if he was hurt because of the guy from District 2, but the protagonist says that at least they were training with him, so he thought it was all right. However, the twin girl asks how he can say that, and if he is going crazy, because he definitely cannot accept this. The scene shifts to another location, with a guy saying that with Jang's help, they will be able to kill the snakes from District 2. However, Jang refuses the offer, saying he only wants to defeat one person now, but the other guy asks him to relax, because if it is the protagonist, there is a way to defeat him, and meanwhile, his snake was just watching. After that, she dives into the water. The other boy then looks back, then asks how they could defeat Jang. Time passes again, and Jang has already reunited with his monster, saying that this is the last day. He asks Jang what he will do if he loses again, but the guy tells him to stop saying those things because it is impossible to know if he will really be defeated that day. Hearing this, the protagonist thinks he already imagined this would happen, saying that since this is the last day, they should make a bet, because if he wins, he will do what he asks. Jang asks what will happen if he wins, but the boy says that this definitely will not happen. Jang, hearing that, gets irritated, saying he really thought he would win. The two then start to prepare. Jang, advancing towards the protagonist, says that his ability will no longer be a problem, throwing a punch at the protagonist. However, the boy manages to block the ability with his sword. Jang thinks that the protagonist probably has a fire resistance attribute. Soon after, he says he thought the guy would be able to win that day, asserting that it is definitely a shame because this time he will win. But at that moment, the guy ends up receiving a cut, and, surprised, he wonders what happened. The protagonist says that he is the one who will win. Hearing this, Jang is surprised, saying he never imagined he could have a secret weapon. However, he is not the only one with a secret ability, asking if he really thinks he will win. Seo, observing the situation, is surprised, wondering what sword that was. Soon after, Jang throws that sword, hitting the protagonist, but he manages to defend himself, activating his distinct fighting ability. But still, it is not enough, saying he has to win no matter what happens. Then the system notifies that his fighting spirit has grown with a distinct fighting ability, and, as a consequence, evolved. Some threads of light appear in the protagonist's vision, who thinks that this is really his awakened ability, because now he can even see Jang's weak points. A fierce battle begins to unfold after that. Our protagonist was completely focused on her. Jang was surprised, asking if the boy could still stand. And soon after receives an attack from Seo's sword, apparently suffering considerable damage. Within seconds, he ends up being defeated. And the protagonist is the winner of the battle. Those voices echo in Seo's head because they were very surprised by what the boy had done, because he managed to win. Besides that, Jang was very injured where he could probably die. The protagonist becomes desperate, thinking he overdid it, saying he has to take him to the priest. But at that very moment, someone almost hits him with a bullet. It is revealed that it was Jang's group, who says they must attack soon, because he must be quite tired. Seo, observing who those guys are, realizes they are the idiots from District 3, concluding that it's better to use a healing potion on Jang for now. But soon after, the protagonist ends up dropping it. Looking at his hand, he realizes it was muddy, thinking it's a magical weapon, and since he was trapped, he had to get out of that place. The system warns that due to lack of strength, the flame ability had been deactivated as a consequence. The protagonist seems to be completely defenseless, but at that very moment, that giant snake appears, devouring one of the players, leaving the group desperate with that gigantic creature. However, the protagonist asks what they were doing since it's a serpent, thinking those idiots surely didn't read the mission manual. Not only that, but he had ordered the snake not to leave the water, no matter what happened. One of the mission rules was to never call a serpent a snake in the next scene. That other player was about to strike the serpent, however. It seems to behave differently than normal. The other guy, confused, thinks that serpent looks a bit strange, and Seo thinks that if a serpent is called a snake, it doesn't become a dragon because in fact it becomes filled with rage and hatred, and an alert system appears, stating that the snake had transformed into a demonic beast. Even after this transformation, Seo's timer remains at 155 hours, thinking that if only it recognized him, he would still have a chance. Soon after, the monster begins to prepare its attack, launching a burst of flames towards all the players, starting to prepare another attack. And from afar, the players were observing the whole situation. Soon after, a masked guy starts making the announcement, asking all present participants to know that a draconic class monster has appeared in the current room, concluding that they must leave the forest, because the monster was literally burning everything Young's group players were. Meanwhile, running desperately, saying they really must leave, the masked guy continues to speak, asking everyone to gather at the sacred tree for safety measures. In the next scene, Shin was helping some players recover, reorganizing them to go to the sacred tree. Amidst that situation, the protagonist thinks that it's much worse than he imagined, and the masked guy makes another announcement because there was a change of plans, and the Guardian of Fate proposed a new mission, and all who participate in the current room mission will now have their missions completed. As a consequence, an additional reward will be sent, concluding that now there is a boss in that room. Time passes again, and the protagonist thinks that everyone was already at the sacred tree, and looking around wonders where the priest was, who soon after he finds, asking the priest to take care of Jang, and he then asks how that man got so injured. The disappointed protagonist says it was his fault. Then Shin approaches Seo, asking if he is okay. Our hero says he is fine because that isn't his blood, and Jang realizes that he is the person from District 3 who had come every day to fight with Seo. Changing the subject, he says that since he was there, his serpent must be fine, asking how he intends to proceed with the new mission, and Seo says he thought he would have to go there alone because that demonic beast is the serpent he was protecting, leaving Shin surprised by what he had heard, saying they can't kill it because otherwise the mission won't be completed. And the protagonist says that's true, but he can't let that continue. In the next scene, Jang awakens, saying that the boy can't kill it, and Jang says that him killing the snake would be much better than the protagonist. Seo wonders if that idiot valued the honor of doing something so much, saying he also didn't want that snake to be killed. In the next scene, the masked guy appears, saying that this is also a problem, for corrupted serpents need to be killed, and they have a large amount of heat and poison in their bodies that could destroy this entire dimension. It's obvious that he could have killed the serpent within the terms of the missions, before concluding that it's a shame that everything he did ended up being a failure. Hearing this, Jang remains silent after that. Seo says he will have to do something, and the masked guy says he definitely can't do everything alone. The protagonist says he has to find a way to deal with that demonic beast. Shishin's question could help him without wasting time. He accepts the offer, concluding that they are friends. And meanwhile, Jang was observing that conversation, wondering if the serpent is nothing to them. The boy stands up, asking what they were doing, questioning if that isn't Seo's serpent since he shouldn't kill it, starting to walk away, irritated, and the protagonist watches this in silence. The scene shifts to Jang in another location, thinking about what the masked guy said about him failing at everything. Not only that, but it is really the truth. Another flashback appears in his head, with someone saying that the guy was tarnishing his name, This man is apparently his father, saying that he is definitely the source of shame. Jang lived 20 years of his life doing everything they asked, and still, they didn't seem satisfied. It wasn't a lack of achievement. In fact, it was simply because he couldn't be the perfect son his parents wanted, and for them, anything less than perfect was a failure, and that's why he thought that being a failure would fade over time. But to this day, it haunts him. Just like that day, the serpent is being seen as an enemy, concluding that must be why he sympathizes so much with that serpent's situation at this moment. Even so, he thought the protagonist would be different from the others. Another flashback appears in his head, with the protagonist watching the serpent. The guy asks why he is helping him, and if he shouldn't hate him now for causing all this with the people from the 3rd district. But Seo says there's no way, questioning how he could hate someone like him. Jang thinks he thought he knew Seo because he definitely trusted him, and just with those words, he feels a huge relief on his shoulders. He knows the protagonist can't let his serpent roam around causing this chaos for having turned into a demonic beast. But if it were possible, just like he did with him, he wished he could save her and relieve her of that pain. In the next scene, the protagonist was holding a key. The blonde number 1 says she can lend him her weapon, and the other asks if they will be able to kill that demonic beast. Then Seo says he wants to make one thing clear, because he wants to take care of the creature himself, all of this without killing her. After a while, Seo had already explained his plan. Chin says she thinks it's worth a try, and the other twin asks if they shouldn't lose to the others, so they don't kill the serpent. However, the protagonist says he doesn't know who would be crazy enough to try to do that, but at the same moment, the 3 remember Gujun. The twin asks what his reaction was when he heard the announcement, and the priest says Gujun got really excited, saying a raid had just started. Seo, looking around, wonders where Gujun is. The scene then shifts to the guy in question asking where everyone is going. The other guy says they are fleeing to the lobby, asking if Gujun wants to fight that thing. They will automatically complete the mission if they wait another day. Questioning why they have to bet on that beast, the guy starts to walk away. But soon after, Gujun grabs the guy's serpent, asking what he will do now, since it seems his serpent has just been killed, asking not to be sad because the same goes for the others too. The group then seems to get scared, and soon after, Gujun starts killing all the serpents, leaving none alive. The other guy says that's not fair, because he is killing all the snakes and leaving only his alive. But then Gujun surprisingly does the same with his, asking if they are satisfied, now concluding that now he has no choice but to kill that snake. The scene then shifts to another location, with Gujun telling Seo that they were going to kill that serpent. Our hero asks why so many people are chasing him, and he says those guys are an army of extras to help the protagonist, saying that he is sure the boy has a plan to kill that thing. Meanwhile, the other players were begging our hero to respond that he really had a plan. Our boy says yes and would like your cooperation, concluding that he knows a way to deal with that serpent. The scene shifts again to a guy saying he has no idea what the director is thinking, concluding that the newcomers might end up dying, and the blondie says that's why they are going to that place. Just as a precaution, then the girl says that the leader of Team Gong was late, making the blondie irritated. That woman was in that place. Not only that, but there was another person he hadn't seen in a long time. In the next scene, that dragon serpent was receiving an attack. The blondie asks who was fighting against the serpent, and the masked guy says it was the rookie leader of Team Gong, named Seo, along with everyone from the 2nd region. Mentioning that they won't be able to kill the creature, asking if they can take care of this and leave, but the girl asks to wait a bit, because that's what the director requested. Still, there's something to be done, because he expected those guys to give up soon, mentioning that if Seo fails, he will recruit him for his 1st region, and the blondie asks if that was his goal in going to that place. The girl continues talking, saying she wants to know where such a strong awakened one came from, because she already feels quite envious, and meanwhile, another guy seems to be irritated. In the next scene, someone hits a shot on the dragon serpent. It's revealed that it was the twin girl with her rifle. The dragon then starts charging its attack, throwing a flame in the direction of the twin girl, but the protagonist appears using his defense magic. The other twin then counterattacks with her arrow. Preparing another one, the girl apparently had a legendary bow. The twin girl was about to receive an attack, but Seo's pet appears to help. The blondie from afar was very surprised, wondering what they were doing, because they keep missing their attacks, mentioning that those weapons are not for people with such horrible skills, concluding that they won't be able to defeat the serpent at that pace. But at that very moment, that creature simply stops. The players quickly start advancing towards it, assuming the creature ran out of breath, but at that very moment, its body is engulfed in flames. A player says that its heat and poison are already bad enough, ordering to put the people with high resistance to fire and poison in front. Still, there were some players who were confused, wondering if they could really do that. One of the players then invokes his ice skill, continuing to push the snake towards the target location. But still, it's very complicated for a few players. Shin appears on the scene, telling the water-type skill users that he will try to restrict its movements, and then should take care of the creature's flames, starting to use his vines to try to bind the monster, and without wasting time, the players begin to advance towards the creature, about to achieve their goal. Soon after, the monster lets out a roar, apparently trying to move. The other player says they won't be able to push the snake more than this, wondering what they can do now. But then Gojam appears on the scene, asking them to stay behind him, using a kind of decomposition skill, and the ground then starts to crumble and the creature begins to fall to the ground. The scene shifts to that masked guy starting to look at the system window. Noticing that the protagonist was already advancing towards the snake, apparently using his flame skill, our hero holds his blade, then strikes it at the creature. Meanwhile, the masked guy was observing everything that was happening. The blondie says he already knew, asking if the players really won't be able to do this, and the other girl is worried, thinking she would bring Seo to her side as soon as he failed the mission, because since she lost the useful newcomers from her first region, she needed to bring someone from other regions, concluding that the plan will be ruined if they succeed and end up killing that serpent, wondering what she can do now. Meanwhile, the blondie was observing what Seo was doing, not understanding anything. The scene shifts again to Seo, who apparently found something he was looking for. A flashback appears in his mind with Gojim saying he thought it was worth trying this. Seo says the problem is that the creature has gone mad, and therefore doesn't recognize him, and Gojim says there's a solution for that, asking to pierce the Baihu pressure point, and then it might recognize him. The scene returns to the present with Seo making Gojim plead for the creature to start recognizing him, which apparently had worked, and the serpent finally returns to its consciousness. Seo, confused, asks if the creature is really recognizing him now, and if by chance it remembers that band because he will tie the friendship token on it again. From afar, the blonde boy was surprised because Seo was taming that monster to make it easier to kill, stating that it is really interesting. The other girl, meanwhile, also observes the situation in silence. Then she says that the protagonist took care of that serpent after judging that the newcomers did not intend to kill it. But the blonde boy asks about what the girl just said, claiming that that region is under his control and only they have the right to decide. But the girl says that for her, Seo is probably in danger, starting to cast a giant spell, apparently hitting the protagonist's sword. The other guy gets very angry, asking if she has gone crazy for just striking a lightning bolt near a newcomer. However, the girl says that Seo had not been hit, leaving the boy surprised by what he had seen. The girl starts to run, thinking it will be terrible if the protagonist dies, and so she has to get closer. The blonde boy asks what she is doing now, to which she replies that she is going to save Seo because he is in danger, starting to use her lightning ability, thinking that this time she really aimed at the creature correctly. Frustrated, the blonde boy says that if something happens to Seo, he will not let this go. They then begin to approach the protagonist, who is next to his pet, who thinks that the messengers are already interfering in the battle. The girl then appears at the location, taking Seo's weapon. She says that the weapon he used worked like a lightning rod. The protagonist recognizes the girl, realizing that she is the manager of Team Gong. Not only that, but she is the woman who appeared in the previous video. The girl then apologizes, saying that she was trying to help him but seems to have ended up in his way. However, she is relieved that he was not hit by her lightning, but the internal injuries of that creature already seem quite bad. She will return the sword and will kill that serpent, but the protagonist says that no one will do that because he does not intend to kill it, and he will not let anyone else do it because that is his dragon. And meanwhile, the serpent watched everything in silence. The girl says that it is not a dragon because it is actually a serpent, and the blonde boy says that even if it were gentle, it is still a monster, concluding that the poison and flames coming from its body are not something that can be controlled. However, for the protagonist, this makes no difference because he still will not kill that creature, but will take care of it. This hero then says he will leave the rest to the Rini, and that pet of his appears, approaching that serpent dragon, apparently performing some kind of enchantment. A glow begins to surround the entire area. The people then were watching everything in silence. Even Shin along with the other players were also there, and the protagonist says that the creature is not a monster, and far from a failure, because it is actually just a serpent dragon. The monster then shrinks its form, and the system notifies that it is starting the purification of the monster's resentment, turning apparently into a kind of cub. The protagonist after this says that now the creature is healed. The girl, surprised, asks if a Kirin spirit can really do that. Then the masked guy appears saying that it is definitely a dragon. After everything that had happened, the system finally appears stating that everyone has completed the mission. Without wasting time, Seo asks the messenger if he can keep the dragon. The blonde boy says he can do as he wishes, but must take care of himself first. After that, the girl calls another masked guy, asking if there are healing items, stating that it is quite expensive but still likes to keep it for emergencies, using some ointments to recover the protagonist from his injuries. Meanwhile, our hero observed the situation in silence, noticing that Jiang was at that location asking if it is his turn to fight the dragon. However, Jiang does not seem excited about it, saying that it is not a serpent but actually a dragon. Seo, for his part, says he does not know if he still has a live snake. However, Jiang says he was not planning to look for another, because he already said before, and since he lost, he will not do that and will simply leave. However, Seo says he will obey his orders first, and the guy, having no other choice, agrees to do so. Seo starts to leave, saying they should talk somewhere else, and Jiang asks why, but he replies that it's nothing serious. Still, Jiang disagrees, saying they should just stay there. Sometime later, Jiang was already arguing with Seo in another place, asking if this is possible. Our hero nodded his head, saying that if they didn't want to, they could do something else. But Jiang agrees, saying he will do what he says, claiming he was eager to work with him. Thus, their systems and destinies end up intertwining. Moments later, a voice asks what was happening because his chest feels heavy. It is revealed that it's the protagonist, thinking he thought he had gotten used to sleep paralysis and nightmares. Not only that, but he simply can't move. But at that moment, his spirit appears, leaving the protagonist confused about what had happened, and soon after managing to grab the pet, asking it to get off him. At that moment, the system alerts that the purification skill was being activated. Seo asks why the creature is using this on him. A light appears after that. Seo, surprised, realizes it's already afternoon, and not only that, but the day has turned. Rin starts to take off Seo's shirt, beginning to purify the remnants of poisonous energy. After all this, Seo thanks the creature for its help. Still, he slept the whole day, claiming he must be quite tired. Soon after, the boy looks under his bed, noticing that the dragon from before was under it, thinking he sent it back to the spirit realm because it had tried to bite Zhang earlier, wondering if he had summoned it while he was sleeping, and besides decides that he must give it a name. Then the boy starts to leave, saying they should first feed it. Thus, the scene shifts to the cafeteria. Seo thinks he now has to pay double for all that food. At that moment, Gojum appears in the place, asking what the name of that dragon is, and the protagonist replies that it's called Yorn. Gojum questions if that isn't the name of a snake, and Seo says it's the name of a dragon to name a dragon Yorn. However, that dragon seems to have gotten very irritated by what Gojum said, saying he had brought back something else before too. Our hero seems surprised, thinking he is right, because it wasn't just Yorn who was brought back. A flashback appears in his mind with Seo asking what his order was, and the protagonist orders him to go to the second region, thinking there's a reason for that masked girl to specify the mission of the second region for the newbies who lost their snakes. Because even if they failed the mission, they would have another chance if it was for another region, and in that case, they would have to do the whole mission again, but that wouldn't be difficult. The scene returns to the present with Gojum asking why our hero did all this, to which he replies that guy seems quite useful. Gojum says there are guys like them in other regions, and the protagonist says maybe it's because he's a rational person, unlike a certain someone. Gojum, surprised, asks if that guy became some incredible person from the future or something like that, but the protagonist asks if he thought he was a regressor. Without hesitation, the guy replies yes, because he really looked like the main character in the snake room. Concluding that he reflected on himself a bit. Claiming he was lacking, Seo wonders what the guy was talking about because he has already messed up more than his share, saying he was a great help against that serpent. However, Gojum says he wasn't talking about helping him because at that moment, he was much worse. At that moment, Shin appears in the place. Noticing that Gojum was there, Ki then replies that he will be leaving since he has rested more than enough and will return to work. Watching the guy leave, Seo thinks he thought he was still active in his writing career. Then Shin greets the protagonist, asking if that guy didn't do anything strange because there were many people who failed the mission because of him, and besides that, numerous people suspect Yang because he's from another region. But Seo asks not to worry about Yang because that guy is a good person. Yang then appears in the place, noticing that Gojum was leaving the room. Entering the room, Yang realizes they were talking about him, and the protagonist then introduces Shin. She says she is Seo's team partner. The guy introduces himself, saying his name is Jang, and he comes from the third region. An awkward silence follows after that. Shin then stands up, wishing the protagonist a good meal. Our surprised hero thinks he found that the girl would talk a little more. Jang asks if that is his girlfriend, and the protagonist replies no. Then Jang says the protagonist seemed familiar to him from the start, mentioning that he thought he was someone who got into a fight some time ago. The same goes for Shin earlier too, because he had the feeling he would work with her in the future. It's like a deja vu because it feels like he knows both of them from somewhere else. Seo asks if it's like the destiny he meant, and Jang says it's a bit awkward to express but still feels a sense that they would become teammates no matter what happens. Hearing this, our hero becomes desperate, wondering if this is really a coincidence, and if by chance he is redirecting the future to the right place. Changing the subject. Jang says he thought Seo was a lonely fool, but actually has many friends claiming he wants to get closer to them. But there is still one person he hates. Specifically Gojum, because that guy killed all the snakes in the snake room, mentioning that he abhors bastards like him. Asking how someone can kill a snake they swore to protect, concluding that he will never get along with that jerk. Hearing this, Seo says he can't keep picking fights with him, or anything like that, thinking he is sure he will get along with Shin and the priest, because he is the same age as the two twins, concluding that everything will really be fine. Soon after, the guy surprisingly says he has a proposal to make, so time passes again and Yang then breaks a door, doing the same thing with another one. After that, he breaks through a wall. The boy finally stops after that, asking if he can now know the reason for being attacked. It is revealed that it is the blonde girl whom I think is number one, saying she simply can't accept. Jang angrily asks who she is to accept him, not mentioning that it was Seo who brought him to that place. However, the girl says she is the master's number one disciple, and besides that, her guardian doesn't like him very much, because he said he has no ethics or morals to just appear out of nowhere and try to take Seo from them. Not only that, but she heard him yesterday telling the protagonist to accept Yubei's words about the Peach Garden Oath. Jang asks if the god didn't like it. He would like to know why he didn't recruit him earlier, and why she is furious with him, since it was she who couldn't convince Seo. The twin says Seo doesn't care about these things, asking why he doesn't give up too, but Jang replies no. The other twin asks if he understands the situation he is in, because they are being patient, because they thought he wouldn't survive a fight against both of them. Thus the other two girls start arguing to see who is the protagonist's number one. The girl with the bow says he must be weak, considering he crawled to her district after failing his mission. Jang in turn asks if they want to fight, mentioning that they seem pretty weak. At that moment, the protagonist appears at the location asking what they were doing, and if they were fighting, mentioning that they were getting along yesterday and even introducing themselves to each other. And then the other twin says it was because Jang keeps talking about those sponsorship things, and that was why her guardian god told her to make sure Jang gave up on that. And the protagonist asks if her guardian god made her fight, questioning if Zeus was still trying to get him sponsored, and if the same thing happens with Jang, and the guy quickly replies that his god really wants to do that. Hearing this, our protagonist falls silent, but soon after seems to have an idea, saying he will accept the sponsorship from the side that wins the fight, leaving the three surprised by what they heard. However, something unexpected happens because Jang says the opponent will be him, and if he defeats all three, they will have to give up their gods too. Not only that, but he will have to receive compensation from their guardian gods, and will need at least one ghost class item. Then Jang starts using his system window, thinking that with the sponsorship from the gods he can borrow their powers, but will have to follow their divine revelations. However, not all orders from the gods are revelations, and he can only blindly obey their orders without judging them on his own, concluding that in the end he would only be a puppet, and the protagonist thinks he doesn't intend to risk that. Then Jang says that his god told him it's not fair because of how strong CO is. So CO says they won't use any abilities, and the three can go at once. And if he gets hit just once, he will be defeated. Thus, the three accept the offer, and the protagonist tells them to start already. The twin girl asks if one attack won't be too easy, but at that moment the protagonist attacks, and she barely manages to defend. And CO says she doesn't have time to worry about him, because that kind of matter is definitely not a joke to him. Soon after, he lands a precise blow on the girl, leaving her sister surprised by what she had seen. And the protagonist holding his sister asks her to shoot, because it's better to do the job well. And at that moment, Yang appears behind the protagonist. However, he easily dodges the attack, throwing the other twin in the direction of her sister. But Jang reappears saying that Seo had forgotten about him. The boy watches the battle seemingly happy. Our hero, noticing this, asks why he is so excited. At that moment, one of the twins throws a bullet in that direction, and Jiang, annoyed, asks why she is shooting at him. Soon after, our protagonist takes advantage of the situation to grab the man's head and smash it into the ground. The irritated twin says she can't let him win. The protagonist then looks back. In a matter of seconds, he advances towards the two girls. Shin, along with her friends, was watching. The companion next to her asks if they should stop that fight. Shin continues to observe the twins, who were apparently very motivated to defeat Seo. The same applies to Jiang, because he was trying several times to attack the boy, who still continued to dodge every time. After that, Shin smiles and simply leaves that room, starting to make a call thanking someone for something. After that, time passes, and the protagonist finally managed to defeat those three, saying there's no reason to fight anymore. However, the other guys still hadn't given up. Seo, hearing this, asks if they aren't going to be behind him all the time for a week like last time. He doesn't care if it's for training, but wants to know the reason for the god's orders because he doesn't like it and is quite furious. It would have been much better if they just weren't getting along. However, they still acted as if they were against each other in battle, and then became enemies because of what their god said, concluding that he really hated this. One of the twins tries to say it's because of the guardian god, and Seo asks what would happen if the guardian god ordered to kill his own sister, affirming that they all need to make their own decisions, instead of doing what others command. Hearing this, Yang remains silent. The twin that I think is number 2 says they lost, concluding that they will really give up. The other sister approaches Jiang, apologizing for what happened and for attacking him so suddenly. The blonde one also apologizes, saying that Jiang is also a good fighter. Hearing this, Jiang gets embarrassed, saying it's all fine. At that moment, the priest appears on the scene, and noticing that everyone was injured, asks if he can heal them. Thus, after all that commotion, the protagonist leaves the place, thinking that they were fighting against each other at first, but in the end were working together. That's why he is happy that this served as a push for them to get closer. Then someone asks if the boy was planning to do this from the beginning. It's revealed to be Shin, saying it's good to make friends through fights, mentioning that she brought the priest there because they were quite excited in battle, and then Seo thanks, asking if she is also uncomfortable with Jiang in that place. However, surprisingly, Shin replies that she doesn't mind. And strangely, the guy seems familiar. Hearing this, Seo is surprised, thinking that Shin feels the same way, but still should think about it positively because at least they won't be on different paths if he ends up disappearing. Then the scene shifts to another location with the woman saying that the rookies who failed in the 3rd region started the challenges in the 1st. Hearing this, the other girl says it's fine, but still doesn't have much hope. Seo had passed easily, asking what happened to Jiang because he was very good but went to the 2nd region. The masked girl asks if she is going to give up on the protagonist, but the girl says she definitely won't do that because she wants him even more now. Not only that, but there's a very good newcomer in the 2nd region. At that moment, a system screen appears with someone saying they would accept the girl's offer. After reading this, she starts to laugh, saying she was wondering how Lilith from Timbingong would react when she finds out. Then the scene shifts to another location, with a masked girl saying that the 7th portal is being opened, and as soon as they clear that demonic realm, they will be able to leave just as they promised. Still, it will be difficult since that room is the last one, and they won't be able to exit before clearing everything like last time. The girl continues to observe the expressions of the survivors and then says it seems she was worried for no reason. As she begins to disappear, she wishes everyone good luck. Without wasting time, the players start to enter the portal. Jiang asks where the priest was, mentioning that Shin said she needed to see something before they left. Then, the blonde girl says she thought the priest was next to Gojong, who is probably still writing his novel. Soon after the protagonist appears, Jiang says the portal is open, urging them to enter quickly. But the boy says he will go in later, stating he still has things to do. Jiang asks what it is, but our hero says it's a secret. The twins then ask why they are waiting. Our hero says he won't take long, asking them to go ahead. And the twin, observing the protagonist, notices he seems quite excited. But at that moment, she changes her expression, starting to walk down a corridor. Soon after, he seems to meet someone. Realizing who it was, he smiles. It's revealed to be Jiang, saying she heard the last portal was opened, asking if he isn't going to enter. Jiang questions what she will do, and the girl says she is going there, asking to go together, but the boy says she can go ahead because he has something to do first. However, Jiang surprisingly blocks the protagonist. Jiang asks what she is doing. She replies that now that she thinks about it, she still doesn't have his phone number, mentioning that she has already gotten the contact of everyone else, asking him to at least give her his phone number. Our hero was about to do that, but unfortunately he ends up refusing. Shin, sadly, asks if the protagonist is really going to do this, and if he plans to never see her again once they leave. Hearing this, our hero remains silent, yet Shin still doesn't seem to accept it, asking if this happens because they always keep a distance between them, and the protagonist still remains silent, thinking that is exactly why he has been distant, because he didn't intend to see them again after they leave that place, because it would be the only way to keep them safe when Bai Qiang comes after him. Meanwhile, Shin was very frustrated with all of this, but surprisingly, the protagonist asks to hand over the phone. Shin, irritated, asks if he wasn't planning to give her a fake number. Hearing this, our hero smiles. Handing over the phone, he says it's his real number. The girl starts to observe Seo. As she begins to leave, she says she trusts him and will call him as soon as they leave, and for that reason, they should meet later. The girl starts to walk away, and Shin thinks there won't be a next time. In the next scene, Seo was training with his creatures, managing to level up his dragon skill. Then, he activates a Hini skill. 4 days pass, and the two creatures seem exhausted. Seo says they did a good job, and for that reason, they should rest, stating that he needs to rush to the demonic realm. At that moment, the system notifies that a divine item has arrived, and Seo wonders how good those items must be since they took so long. The boy then receives several peculiar things. Without wasting time, he starts to analyze them, thinking that they gave him a dragon rank item, and it was fine for them and their gods to compete against each other that way. At that moment, the masked girl appears, asking if he hasn't entered yet because he was waiting for those items. Our video ends here. If you liked it, leave your like. See you next time. Bye-bye.